Hello. Okay, we're going to get going. There's still some people not in the room, I believe, so but hopefully they'll catch up. They're probably still eating their lunch. So welcome to the 2025, nearly said 26 there, Futures, Foresight and Horizon Scanning Conference. It's great to be hosting again. As many of you will know, we held the conference last year for the first time. This is the second year. We've had a great turnout, so I hope you have a great time, really enjoy the day. We're not expecting fire alarms, but the fire exits are on either side of me, and if you can convene at the front if there is an emergency. Follow lots of committee members, all with T-shirts on, so hopefully easily identifiable and scattered around the room. So if you do get lost, just pick on one of those and follow them along. I'm going to talk for about 23 minutes to keep us to time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, I guess, where we are with the Innovation Observatory and our journey as we now progress into our new contract. So for many of you who came last year, you'll know that we were at a strange point in our time where we'd been hosting the NIHR Innovation Observatory, holding that contract for about 8 years. We're now into our final year of the previous contract, and we have successfully secured the next contract, the next iteration, which will take a slightly different shape and model, and so we thought it'd be useful to start to introduce that here at this conference and open the doors maybe for some future collaboration and some new friends. So the new award starts in April 2026. We've got a refreshed vision, we've got new objectives and a slightly new ambition. I think the ambition has largely remained the same, although the means by which we'll achieve that ambition hopefully have changed slightly. So we've built on our journey and the lessons we've learned so far. So we've got 9 years of learnings in this space, and I think that for those of you who work in Horizon Scanning, Foresight, or just in the system generally, you know how much has changed over the last 9 years. So we've got lots to build and learn from. And equally, we've tried to reshape our structure a little bit to really drive some delivery and impact in that policy space where historically we've been more in the data space, I think it's fair to say. We'll have many more capacity building opportunities and also a greater emphasis on engagement and collaboration. So hopefully there'll be more opportunity for us to work as a network and a team rather than do everything on our own. So our vision and values have stayed pretty much static. So I'm not going to read out the vision. I'll let you read that while I talk through the values. But really, we're about teamwork, courage and ambition, curiosity and open-mindedness, can't speak today, sorry, inclusivity and equity and integrity and quality. And that underpins how we've worked for the last 9 years, and it will underpin how we work in the future. So what we know is that the system has changed significantly in the last nine years. We've got rapid medtech growth, and innovations in that space are really coming thick and fast, and it's hard to keep up. It's hard for anyone to keep up and make these decisions. We know that there's been a shift in horizon scanning needs to more integrated care, more patient, putting the patient at the centre of that, and we want to really support that move. We know that research inclusion is now being prioritised in a way that it wasn't previously, and that's been a slow and steady change to how we address those things. And we know that we want to democratise the access to data. There's lots of data available, but actually getting your hands on it and doing something meaningful with it still remains a challenge. So the new centre has an increase or a change of aims. So we're looking to continue to develop our methods and our AI tools. As many of you know, we've spent a lot of time over the last few years building technical infrastructure to support our horizon scanning, but also the methods outside of that to support how we do things rapidly, how we shape things to really analyse these diverse data sources that we're looking at. We want to make sure that we're identifying and sharing innovations, opportunities and challenges and gaps in a way that allows people to act on those. So not just directly to one stakeholder, but to many stakeholders across the system, so that we can try and ensure that there is some... we're supporting that shaping of the system rather than just giving one piece of information to one person. We want to deliver signals that allow for those innovations to really align with the sector needs, and there'll be a lot of focus on unmet needs and how we do that in the new contract as well. I'm not going to read all of these out, but hopefully you can see that we're trying to prioritize some of the areas that are really important around sustainability, around implementation, and really thinking about how we embed diversity and equity into that space as well, and continue to deliver the high quality outputs that we do. So as I say, we're building on what we've got. So we've got a really diverse team, and the team have been key to our success to date, and really driven some of our achievements over the last 9 years. But equally, the team doesn't stop with the internal team. We've also got our patient advisory group and the voluntary community and these other expert groups, enterprise groups that we bring in to really drive and shape the work that we're doing. And more we'll be leaning into those groups to try and support ensuring that what we do is fit for purpose. Again, in the new contract, we've taken a step away from being quite internally facing in how we deliver the work, and we'll be working with a lot more strategic delivery partners. So some of the names on this board we already work with, some are new, and we will be collaborating and moving towards joint delivery and a lot more of the outputs that we drive. If your name's not on the list and you see yourself in this space and you want to collaborate, then reach out. You know, as I say, the doors are open, and we're really looking to see how we can work together to move faster and further. We're very conscious that we don't have the depth and breadth of all of the skills we need to really make a system shift. But hopefully together we'll be able to do a little bit more. We know what we have currently, so we have our people and our proven track record, so we've got these current enablers. We're hoping to in the new contract we've built in some addition. Sorry, I'm really tired today, so I'm just tripping over my words a little bit. But we've built in some future enablers, I guess, that we feel that we will really enhance how we move on that journey. So we've expanded our scope and ambition, like I say, and that's partly because we wanted to, but also partly because DHSC and NIHR needed us to, because we need to fulfill a particular role, and there's a gap for some things. We've expanded our leadership team, and I'll put a slide up, but again, we're really keen that we have a broader and more depth at that leadership level to really drive some of these spaces we need to be in. We're moving to this hub and spoke model, so we really will be pulling in, and the putting up the strategic partners isn't just to put up a load of logos and say, oh, look at us, we're going to collaborate. You know, we're really going to draw on the expertise of these groups to shape and drive our work in a different direction. There'll be much more engagement. So again, if you are in this space, whether you're industry, patients, whether you sit in an agency, whether you sit in a research centre, an academic, you know, reach out, because we want to try and increase that engagement to really drive a change. We've got some new programmes of work and a real, some enhanced governance structure, and then a focus on capacity building. So this is the new leadership team. So some familiar faces, so some, like me, I've been around forever. But we've been joined by some other people. I'm not going to go through them all, but effectively this will be the team that will lead the new centre and hopefully deliver the change we're looking for. We've got a focus on research inclusion, so we're working on our research inclusion strategy. We're not doing that alone, and we've been working, I know Jacob's in the audience, we've been working with National Voices and Leaders Unlocked and others to really drive some of this work. So we'll be embedding our methods to really think about equity in that emerging medtech space, to think about how we tackle that inclusion with the Research Delivery Network and with others working in this space in research trials, and really thinking about how we start to put that lens, that ethical and equitable lens on all of our scans to really try and shape things much earlier in the system to what we do currently. So we'll carry on scanning across the three horizons as we do now. So we have the emerging, the translational and the imminent horizon, but underpinning that, we'll also start to look at equity right early in that emerging and implementation, really in the emerging space, so we can start to influence how they travel. So when they get to the transitional and the imminent, when we know they're coming, we know they can be implemented. We're not trying to tackle those problems last minute, we're pulling them all forward. And so if anyone has an interest in that space, again, we'd be open to having some conversations, because it's a really important area. It's far too many innovations get to that last minute, and then we find out that actually they don't fit into the NHS system, or they just don't work. So these are our new programs of work. So we've got 4 key programs of work, and central to all of that is our technical infrastructure. So we'll have a priority, proactive and reactive programs of work that will deal with horizon scans in slightly different ways. At the centre of that, like I say, we'll be drawing heavily on our technical infrastructure to provide that data and the underpinnings, and the programs will then do the translational part. That would be also drawn together by a demand signalling program. Wrapped around all of that will be our capacity building and career development, and that's not just academic career development, and I say that as somebody who sits in an academic role. You know, this isn't aimed at just churning out more professors or more senior lecturers. This is aimed at trying to embed these types of methods and practices and this way of thinking across the whole system. So we're looking at how we can do that in industry, how we can do it with our policy partners, and just more broadly build capacity where capacity needs to be. Excuse me, this is a quick overview of our technical infrastructure. I'm not going to talk in detail, but there are others kicking around if people are really interested in the technical aspects. But essentially, we've rebuilt our main data engine, and we've now consolidated a lot of the platform into AWS. So it can ingest a lot of information, it will clean it up, it will put it in a structured format, and we'll be able to extract that much more easily. So the data will be readily available for those transitions. It's a work in progress, I'm not going to lie. Like all technical infrastructures, we're not going to suddenly get to April the 1st and flick a switch and it will be perfect. But we've been working on this for a long time, and every month, every year, we make more incremental benefits to the team in how it drives efficiency. And we're getting to the stage now where this will also support some of our capacity building. So in the app space, people will be able to come and collaboratively build apps that will then allow data to be extracted that suits individual needs. So it suits individual agency needs, whether that's a dashboard, whether it's something different. So there'll be a lot of work in that space. It'll also allow us to easily spin up trend dashboards and undertake predictive modelling and stuff. So there's lots of exciting, I guess, methods development in this space that we hope will quickly translate into a policy impact. So one of the new programs, I guess the 3 horizon scanning programs are labelled as new programs, but undertake, I guess, similar work to what we do now, just in a slightly different programmatic format. The demand signalling is probably something we haven't done a lot of in the past. So again, we're looking at how we can take all of the information we routinely collect and analyse, how we can co-design and define those unmet needs with the stakeholders in the system, and then how we can start to really shape a useful signal, a signal for industry where there's a true innovation gap, signals for funders where there's an innovation but there's a research gap, and signals for any of the other stakeholders who have these needs. And I think it's something we're keen to engage the wider system with, to really understand how we do that and how we do it well. We know that we've got national priorities, and we know that within those priorities there are innovations in the pipeline that could potentially be useful, but we also know that there are some priorities where we have no innovations in the pipeline. There's nothing coming, and so how can we then use the data and the intelligence we have to really stimulate people, the right people thinking about what those solutions are, and that's an area that we're going to attempt to do a lot more in the new contract. So we know we need to prioritise. We need to prioritise the work we do because we have an infinite resource, even when we've got a technical infrastructure. But we also need to prioritise to address some of the unmet needs in the system, and some of the overload in the system as well. There's lots of ways we can do that, but we're looking at how we develop a prioritisation programme to really start thinking about where our priorities will be and how we can support making recommendations that will actually drive innovation and pull innovation into the areas where it's really needed. And this is one of the things that, again, is new in our programme of work. The other area, so historically we've done a lot of capacity building, but we've done it quite informally. I think in the new iteration of the Innovation Observatory, there will be a formal capacity building element. It will be much more structured. There will be opportunities for secondments and internships and fellowships and all the other things that you might expect from a well-considered capacity programme. We're looking to really deliver and drive growth in the understanding and methodological use of horizon scanning to help other parts of the system really start to shape how they act and how they impact on the wider sector. So it will be, this capacity building offer will be available across the broad range of stakeholders, but also won't just be academic capacity building. So I know in a lot of the settings, whenever people start talking about capacity building, everybody always immediately starts talking about fellowships and the academic route, but we're really looking for ways to support capacity building outside of that. And we may not have all the answers, but hopefully by having these engagements and talking with the wider system, we will be able to develop something that is fit for purpose for different needs. So watch out for that coming in. I'm sure we'll be bugging you all for the years out. So moving forward, I think we're going to have more focus on preparedness. So we really want to start guiding UK policy and system readiness so that the people making these decisions have the information and intelligence they need at their fingertips when they want it. We want to really think about how we perform knowledge mobilisation, deliver knowledge mobilisation in a slightly different way so that we can ensure that we've got actionable knowledge, again, when it's needed, not 6 months after the policy or 2 years before anybody's thought about it, really getting people to think about what's coming and how they use it so we can make a shift to being prepared rather than being on the back foot all of the time. We want to, through collaboration and understanding where these areas of unmet need are, we really want to start pulling innovation into the system where we can to support that. Now, clearly, we won't be the ones pulling it, but we can give people that are in those positions where they know what they need, the intelligence and the evidence to support that pull so that we can move away from a push system, which we currently have. And we really want to, I guess, work on this foresight and method space to drive those horizon scanning methods to really deliver impact, both for system needs, but mainly, I guess, for patient impact. That's, ultimately that's why we're all doing this. We're not doing it just for the sake of the methods or just because we can build fancy tech. So this is to make sure that patients get what they need and there's a change. So for me, I guess one of the big learnings over the last 9 years is that very few things in life are an individual sport, but horizon scanning definitely isn't. If you want it to have an impact, then it's a team sport. We need all of the system to play together to achieve this. There's no point us churning out things if everybody closes their ears and doesn't pick them up and doesn't do anything with them. So I guess for the next day and a half and probably beyond that, so for now, I'd like you to think about, I guess, going through the next day and a half, thinking about how you share those insights, how you challenge assumptions, and how you really embrace diversity. And I was thinking very late last night about how I would close the opening speech. And I think really, I wanted to set you all a bit of a challenge to think about over the course of the next, however long it is, 12 hours that you'll be in a room, to speak to somebody you didn't know before, to actually leave the conference with a contact and a network and an idea that you didn't have when you arrived, and then to come back next year and actually stand up here and tell us what that looked like. What did you achieve by actually having a conversation today or tomorrow and then acting on that conversation? So not just networking because we're in a room and it's nice to have lunch and you see people. I just saw some people over lunch I haven't seen for a year. I'm going to point at Rich there. I haven't seen him for a year. It's very nice to see him. But actually, we haven't done anything. We met last year. We had a long conversation about all the things we could do. And here we are again a year later. We'll have another nice lunch probably. We'll probably see each other later over dinner. We'll have a nice conversation about all the things we could do. But actually, we haven't done anything. I've done my thing. He's done his thing. But together, we haven't done anything. Now, I feel like I've achieved a lot. It's been a very busy year. We've got a new contract. We've got a new... teams taking shape, everybody's, we're going somewhere. But ultimately, and Rich is probably sitting there thinking, well, I've had a busy year too. I've done all this. And his HDR UK probably done lots, in there. But imagine what we could have done if we'd done it together. Would have been one more incremental step that we could have taken. So if we can all take one more incremental step, then next year, if we host a conference again, we'll be in a different place. So I would say collaborate today for impact tomorrow. And then I'm very happy to take an email from anyone about January next year to tell me, or maybe let's say June next year, to tell me that they'd like to do the keynote at this conference, which we will host again next November, with something that they started in the room over the last 2 days. I'm going to end there and just say, have a great time. I'll be around. Lots of the senior team are around. You've seen their pictures, so feel free to talk to anyone. Equally, if you don't get a chance, drop us all an email. Thank you very much.
A super opener to the conference, so thank you very much for giving us that, and also a really good overview of where the eye is up to and what the future holds. That's great, thank you. So my name's Pauline, I'm one of the committee members and also will be the comp here for this session, so may I add my own welcome to you all. And at this point, this is where the conference splits, so the oral presentations will be taking place in here. If anybody wants to go to the workshop, that's in the appropriately named workshop. So if you want to get there, go through this set of doors, just through here, and then head out to your left near whereabouts you came in. So if anybody wants to head there, please do so now. And if I could ask our first speaker, Tharni, to get ready to come to stage, I'll just give everyone a minute or two to make their way. If you could do that as quickly as possible, please. Hello, you Tharni? Lovely to meet you. Okay, fantastic. Who's our second? Zara, brilliant. Yeah. Lovely to meet you. Great. Well. Come along. Cool. Well, I'll just give everyone just 30 seconds just to leave the room, and then I will just very briefly introduce our session and then welcome you to the stage, if that's okay. Cool.
Okay, shall we get down then?
I mean, you can stay there if you want. It's entirely up to you, and you're happy with the clicker.
Okay.
So we've got a clicker there. We'll sit there. No problem. Great, everyone, thank you. We've got quite a lot to get through today, so if anybody else wants to head off to the workshop, if I could ask you to do that now. Super. Well, in that case, it is my great pleasure to introduce the first session on the first day of the second iteration of this conference. We are going to be having a look at insight implementation, bridging the gap between horizon scanning, foresight, future thinking, and real-world action of technology and innovation. And it's my great pleasure to welcome to the stage our first speakers, Tharni and Zara.
Hi, my name's Zara and this is Tharni. So we are from NICE, and NICE, as some of you may not know, some of you will know, we are a HTA body that assess both medicines and health technologies for clinical and cost effectiveness. And we also produce guidance that is used across the NHS and the wider healthcare system as well. So I am the Horizon Scanning Lead for Medicines, and Tharni is the Horizon Scanning Lead for Health Technology at NICE, and we sit within the Enhanced Horizon Scanning team. So just a little bit about our Horizon Scanning team to start with. So our function was established with a couple of aims here. We have only been established for about a year now. And that's not to say that NICE wasn't doing any horizon scanning before this point. So NICE was doing horizon scanning within various different teams, but it was more closer in the pipeline that we were looking at. So about a year ago, the Enhanced Horizon Scanning team was set up, and we aim to look at the 2 to 5 year time frame. But obviously, when we look at that, we're also having to look at the nearer term as well. So it's essentially the 0 to 5 year time frame, isn't it? So the aim of this is to enhance NICE's readiness and responsiveness to emerging disruptive medicines, to help with system preparedness, and also support internally at NICE with our processes. So it'll help prepare NICE teams for upcoming challenges, such as things like new methods based on the horizon scanning pipelines that we have both in medicines and health tech. It's also to join up our intelligence streams and share information both internally at NICE and across the healthcare system. So we'll talk in the next couple of slides we'll touch on some of the work we do collaboratively. So enhanced horizon scanning at NICE differs from the usual timeframe. So as I said, usually it's in some places, and previously at NICE it was a nearer term timeframe that was being looked at, and we are primarily focusing on the 2 to 5 year timeframe. And this is to allow sufficient time for NICE to identify and prepare for the emergence of new regulatory approaches and care models. So it gives us enough time to basically adapt our processes, review if anything needs to change, and also feed that back into the system for preparedness within other organisations as well. So just looking at medicines and health tech. So this slide is basically just showing how the routes of horizon scanning, the processes of horizon scanning, are different between medicines and health tech. We are still continually developing our processes, but this is what we've come up with for now. So it looks at a couple of our outputs, some of the information sources we use, and the prioritisation of those. I'm not going to go into this into a lot of detail, but we'll talk about some of this throughout the presentation.
Oh.
That wasn't our slide. So the team works across, the team being me and Tharni, we work across system partners and NICE to support the preparedness for new medicines and health technologies. We do this by 3 main ways. So firstly, we collaborate with NHS England and other system partners on horizon scanning cycles. So for medicines, that involves working with the Department of Health, NHS England, and we also hold joint pipeline meetings and advisory boards with Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and various other organisations that input into those. Again, with Tharni, you also do that with system partners, and we both also feed into the Medicines and Medical Devices Access Groups, which is a collaborative platform that's been set up. Secondly, we undertake commission scans for various other teams within NICE. So this could be to support with the methods team, it could be support the guidelines team, the clinical teams within the organisation. So these are very varied requests. The outputs look very differently, and it just depends on what is required at the time from the various other teams. And then thirdly, we are trying to proactively identify disruptive medicines and health technologies. So there's a number of ways we're doing this. We're trying to look at industry news and things like that. We're trying to use AI a little bit. We're trying to do a bit of media monitoring and various other sources, just interactions with industry as well, and conferences, just speaking to people. So as the team have established all these connections and embedded itself across NICE, what we're going to talk about today is some some stakeholder testing that we've done, and basically doing an exercise to understand what the users of NICE wanted from us as a newly established enhanced horizon scanning team.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the stakeholder mapping. So as Zara said, this was a user research exercise, a bit of qualitative research to understand who within NICE were our stakeholders for horizon scanning, what the previous challenges were within NICE and how horizon scanning could perhaps address those challenges. We spoke to our senior advisors and we identified potential stakeholders within NICE and tried to span a wide range of directorates, teams, roles, and individuals. So we included people from our medtech topic intelligence who gather all the initial information for potential guideline topics. Our prioritization board, whose role is to prioritize guideline topics and also updates to guidance. Medicines optimization, our patient safety teams, our evaluation and methods teams, our guidance writing teams, and our implementation teams. So really from front to the end of the whole NICE process, basically. And we had 19 stakeholders that we interviewed. So we conducted these semi-structured interviews virtually, recorded a transcript, and then we used a large language model to initially conduct a thematic analysis, and then both Zara and I had a check through to ensure the results were accurate. So there are some emerging themes that came from the stakeholder mapping. So the first was proactive and early intelligence. So there was a clear need for horizon scanning to provide that type of intelligence, and there was clearly value in that intelligence feeding into different NICE processes. Another was on the format of information and the cadence. Stakeholders said that they would prefer information in structured formats at regular intervals. They said that they really valued understanding how far away the innovation was from being from readiness or in entering the market. They also wanted to understand how disruptive the innovation might be, so disruptive to a clinical pathway or disruptive to our evaluation methods so that we could prepare in advance. For HealthTech in particular, they wanted information to be presented as PICO, so Population Intervention Comparator Outcome. And that was really to understand the use case and the value proposition of the HealthTech, because at the moment that information isn't so clear. Fragmentation and siloed working was also a theme that came up. So there are a lot of people who are gathering intelligence and data and evidence at NICE. And it was important for Horizon Scanning as a team that's preceding a lot of the information that already comes through at NICE to making sure that we're not duplicating work and we're ensuring a sort of joined up way of working. And lastly, on system readiness, so as sort of Zara has alluded to, there is potential for Horizon Scanning to feed into readiness by identifying that disruptive innovation and ensuring that any sort of clinical pathway redesign has occurred as a result of that. So although we looked at a wide range of stakeholders, we actually identified 4 sort of key user profiles. So the first, strategic decision makers, so people who would make decisions and prioritize based on Horizon Scanning information. Intelligence gatherers, so people who might be looking at more of a nearer term sort of landscape, but would value the sort of early intelligence. Evaluators who would change and adapt their methods based on information of tech that's coming down the pipeline, tech and medicines. And system conveners, so people within NICE who have a role to talk to people within the system and ensure that we do go towards readiness for different disruptive innovations. And just to loop back, so we revisited our route to impact map, and we sort of looked at what the key impacts of Horizon Scanning could be. So for medicines, some of the tangible impacts include identifying medicines which might result in a funding variation early, as well as enabling us to schedule our topics in a really efficient way. For HealthTech, we also identified that there was an opportunity to engage with innovators early and perhaps guide them through evidence generation, make it a little bit more likely that they will be evaluated by NICE successfully. And both for medicines and HealthTech, we identified that it enabled our senior management team to focus their attention on really the high impact topics that were coming down the pipeline and manage their resources efficiently. And the key activities within that also result in that whole system preparedness and NICE preparedness, which we're hoping is the overall aim of Horizon Scanning. So, as Professor Craig said, it's not a single person sport. So we are aiming to collaborate with all our system partners who are these key players in enabling our guidance to be implemented successfully. So that's MHRA, DHSE, NHS England, as well as ensuring that we are producing timely reports to our own prioritization board and decision makers.
So just as a bit of a summary, Horizon Scanning can have a high impact at NICE for various reasons that Tharni has already spoken about, but the main ones being it helps to improve processes and prioritization. It delivers timely, high impact and relevant guidance. It can support in doing that, and it can help to enhance system readiness and industry alignment across the various different partners across the healthcare system. And this exercise has been valuable to fully embed our new function within NICE and across the system, but it's been used to inform the design of NICE's Horizon Scanning processes, which we have started using this for, and we continue to develop these processes. It lays the groundwork for aligning Horizon Scanning outputs with their stakeholder needs, and it will ultimately enable the relevant teams to bridge the gap between early insight implementation and accelerating the uptake of the innovations across NHS. The other thing we are aiming to do as part of this is we are trying to link up the medicines and the health tech parts of Horizon Scanning where possible, and we've been trying to do that through various different things that we've been doing. So for the next steps of this piece of work, we are going to do some external stakeholder mapping to try and determine what the needs are from external stakeholders in a similar way. So thank you for listening. Has anyone got any questions?
I work in MHRA, and we're just setting up a similar sort of parallel function to yourselves. So it's really good to see what you guys have done in the last year. I was wondering if you had any lessons learned from setting up the process that you could share today.
I think it's just, I think one thing that we learned is that it's really important for us to be visible across the organization. It's a really big organization, and horizon scanning was already happening at NICE, just not in perhaps a systematic way and for that horizon. And so it's really important for us to sort of insert ourselves into meetings and be represented so people knew that we existed and people could request our services when they needed it.
Yeah. And it's being visible and introducing ourselves, but remaining visible. So not just be like, we're here, and then not be around.
Hi, thank you for your excellent talk. I'm working at a Dutch healthcare institute. It's, I guess, similar to NICE. I'm happy to see, first of all, that we come to the same sort of conclusions as you have, so that's comforting. I was wondering, because NICE has run this program on this HealthTech Connect program, which is discontinued, unfortunately. I was wondering if there were any lessons learned with regards to stakeholder involvement with HealthTech Connect, and I don't know why it's been discontinued, but maybe.
Oh, I mean, that happened a bit before our time, but so I'm not sure if I feel 100% comfortable talking about that. But if we chat later, then I can link you up with people who were involved in that project.
Brilliant. I think we're pretty much out of time now for questions. So brilliantly well timed. Thank you very much. If everyone could join me in giving these two a big round of applause. Thank you. Well done, guys. It's fantastic. Great. If I could ask Antonio, our next speaker, to come to the stage. If you could join me, give me a warm welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Antonio. I work for the Health Innovation Network in South London, and today I'm going to be speaking about one of the most recent and exciting projects we're working about on telerehabilitation. There you go. But first, I'm going to introduce you to the Health Innovation Networks. I've seen quite a few of my colleagues around, so you might all be familiar already. But in any case, I come from the Health Innovation Network in South London. We are hosted by Guy's and St. Thomas. We are a team of about 75 people, a bit more, working across a whole different range of themes. This includes digital transformation and technology, which is what I said, but also long-term conditions, mental health, evaluation, etc. We are a whole network of 15 centres across England. We are deeply, we influence the innovation agenda, for example. We've got a lot of ties with NHS England, with the Office of Life Sciences. And then we also work quite closely with a network of industrial collaborators, with patients, but also with clinicians, which is how we deliver some of our projects. So this is about this Telerehab decision support system, which is a augmented reality-based rehabilitation service that helps patients to have balanced rehabilitation at home. The focus is on balance because, among other things, especially quite fitting for the topic of today, is a major driver of health inequalities, especially affecting the elderly and people that can't access effectively the clinics, or they don't have easy access to them. This telerehabilitation project has got partners all across Europe. We are working with UCL in the UK, but we also got partners in Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy, etc. And this is a bit of a picture of how it sort of works. So you've got a VR set, you've got gamified therapy, so you can you have a virtual coach that will guide you through the exercises. We've got an AI coach. We've got multiple sensors, position sensors, and essentially it's designed to help the patient conduct the whole therapy autonomously at home. And this at-home component is quite important, as we will see in a minute. Our role in this consortia, while the other partners are developing the technology and testing them through randomized controlled trials, we're more focused on the needs articulation. So we're not only about does this technology work, but also if it works, how does it actually fit in the system, who will be paying for it, and will it actually reach everyone that it needs to reach, all the patients? Do we need to have any considerations around, the accessibility, for example? Essentially our role at the HIN. And to do that, we've conducted a series of exercises that helped us understand more about what's the need for these sort of systems, what are the gaps, and what's the people actually excited about. So we started with a market access review, which gave us a sort of overview at the highest level of the need for rehabilitation systems. We focused on Europe, where we studied all the demographics, all the different pathways, all the different how the different healthcare systems work. Then we did a horizon scan and a literature search, which we narrowed down then to see, okay, we know this is what's happening at national, international level. What is the innovation pipeline actually looking like? And then finally, we have done a number of focus groups. So just to go to that extra level of granularity of what's the people actually saying, what are the perspectives, what are the experiences using this technology, and how we can use that to shape what's been developed. For today, though, we're going to focus on the first two. And just a bit on methodology, how we conducted these scans. We've consulted a number of public service sources, literature, databases, and all sorts. But we also got ourselves at the Health Innovation Network quite a wealth of information through interaction with innovations, through a lot of our programs that we've been commissioned to do. We've got, for example, we're quite lucky in the Health Innovation Network South London to work with the Digital Health London team. And we also have other programs like Mindset, and through that, and a number of set of tools that we've developed to unearth these innovations, interaction we've had. We've conducted these horizon scan that, of course, got some limitations because a lot of the times we had to rely on public information, like sales pitches, so a lot of things might not be accurate, but also because the field is ever growing, you can't ever really capture 100% everything that is happening. This is rather a snapshot in time when we were conducting this scan of what was the landscape looking like. In any case, so if we start with the findings of our market access report, we found 3 major clinical areas that we focused on. These was stroke, long COVID, and vestibular disorders. The 3 of them represent quite unique challenges. Stroke, for example, is estimated by 2035, it will be increasing by 50%. Long COVID affects unproportionately people that live in more marginalized backgrounds. There's reports that say even could be as high as twice as much. And then vestibular disorders, which is a major cause of falls, and fall-derived injuries as well, represent about 55 billion for Europe. So looking at the data, these seem the best or the highest diseases to focus on. We then focus on different European markets, the main ones, some of which were part of the consortia, but some of the we also decided to include because they represented quite big markets or quite big representative countries for these for this type of technology. And we made quite a comprehensive report that was about 50 pages long, but the 3 key learnings for me were, first, there's a lot of pathway complexity. Systems are fragmented, and not only in the UK, everywhere in Europe, and especially when it comes to rehabilitation. There's a lot of fragmentation going on. There's a lot of, for example, who pays for which in each region might vary. So there's quite a need for evidence on these technologies. there's a lot of inequalities, and especially the main one that we found was about rural areas and access to your clinic as one of the big ones, which is unsurprising given the theme rehabilitation, which on itself poses a limitation on the patients. And there's finally quantifiable access and quality gap, as I said. And as we will see in a minute, there was also quite a lack of evidence gathered by the companies, so that represented a further challenge for implementation. Looking at the Horizon scan, so we scanned through all the innovations that we could find. We found 64 innovations in total, of which 40% were adapted for home settings, so that seemed to be quite an emerging theme that seemed to address a lot of these access challenges. A lot of them showed some health inequality considerations, not necessarily on access, but they could be, for example, on the design of the games. For people that might have cognitive decline, they will have some considerations. But unfortunately, we could only find quantified benefits, reported benefits for about 15, 17 of them, which was a bit disappointing because given the need for evidence that we've seen these companies need to have. And finally, about 65% of the companies we found are based in the UK, although this might be a bit biased because obviously being from the Health Innovation Networks and having networks en route mostly in the UK, most of them came through our own pipelines. And this is a bit of a breakdown of the maturity levels of the companies. Only about 15% of them were on a stage where they were mature enough that they could scale, but the rest were either having small implementation sites, piloting, or in research. So the field is, while there's some maturity, it felt that it was still on a bit early stages. And then to complement this search, we did some wider literature search. I like this image because it condenses a bit what we found. These are essentially clusters of terms that are cited together. And what they say is what academics are talking about in the papers. And there's 4 clusters here, but it's nice to see that they're sort of aligned with what we've been saying. So there's a cluster on type of technologies that are coming, things like artificial intelligence, for example. There's some clusters about patients, and especially as well about patient inequalities, which, as I said, sort of match what were our early funding. So it was a nice confirmation overall. And then this is my last slide, which is about overall findings. So I think the main thing for me is to find about how much there's a shift to digital despite all the traditional challenges in rehabilitations, and see how much the companies that are upcoming are actually integrating health inequalities consideration in the development. Also seeing, whilst the systems have been fragmented and there's been a lot of challenges for companies, traditionally we've seen more and more digital pathways that are being incorporated, and that hopefully represents an opportunity for these companies to come in and work with the healthcare systems. And however, this is not without challenges. So we found some of which the main one were the need for evidence, the need for regulations, specific regulations as well, for virtual reality, as they seem quite scarce across the countries that we studied, and also guidelines for procurement, scaling, among others. And I think this was my last slide, so yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. That was really interesting. You put up a stat at the end there, so sorry to ask a really detailed question, but it relates to my interests. 51% of companies considered inequality, so how did they consider it? And what kind of impact did it then have on the development of the innovation?
It's hard to quantify the impact they had at this stage. What we did, because what we found through, especially other scans that we've done, is that the benefits quantified doesn't normally come with a health inequalities badge with them. They're normally like, we've saved this much time, or we've saved this much money. What we did as a first approach was to look at which companies have reported in the development something that had to do with inequality. So let's say how many had considerations in the gamification for people that may have cognitive declines, for example, that sort of thing, which is probably one of the reasons why it was that high, because it was such a big area on itself. But it was the best approach that we could think of to at least see if there was an interest at all, or they were just not developing, games that might not be useful for people in the tribe area. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, yeah, it was more about if they mentioned that on the development.
Hi there, thank you for your talk, it was really interesting. I was particularly interested in your slide where you said you did some kind of clustering of terms. What did you use to do that? Did you use like Claude AI, or was there a different method you used? Thank you.
No, for that one we used, there's a free database called Dimensions, which is sort of the equivalent for Scopus, but through that you can export a lot of the citations, a lot of the document text, and then through that there's another tool called VoluSVieware that does all the clustering, all the finding the terms, etc. So there was an AI involved in making that, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. That was really interesting. And one of the slides you said, and one of the reflections you had, was that when you looked sort of internationally at other pathways that innovations took, it was all really complex. Did you see any examples that were less complex?
Short answer, no. I think all systems got the complexity in the ways. I can't think at the moment which was the one that I thought was the most straightforward to access, because either they had very fragmented, so it wasn't easy for companies to scale, or the pathways to get the cost funded was complicated, and hence they were going to reach people that could afford it. So there's always complexities in any sorts. So I wouldn't be able to tell you which one I thought was the simplest, unfortunately.
Super. I think we'll call a halt there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And speaking so well timed. Brilliant. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Simone and Greta.
It's a good start. Thanks, everyone. I'm Simone from the HealthTech Research Centre Network, and Greta.
Hi, I'm Greta. I'm a Public Partnerships Manager within the HealthTech Research Centre based in Newcastle.
So I'm going to talk you through the HealthTech Research Centres more generally, how the network helps to support them, and how we use our federated approach. And then Greta's going to talk more about how we do that specifically for PPIE and research inclusion. So there are 14 HealthTech centres across England. They were previously NIHR funded, can never remember the name, MedTech and in vitro diagnostic cooperatives, but they are now HealthTech research centres. There's 14, they're centres of excellence that support innovators to bring digital technologies and medical devices and diagnostic tools to the NHS and to patients. And how they do that is by supporting evidence generation, so in terms of clinical evaluations, in terms of health econometrics, so the cost and benefit, and also in PPIE in terms of usability and also inclusion. So once the NIHR had decided to refund all of the HealthTech research centres, they decided it'd be useful to have a network that was there to support the HRCs and to add value where we could to what they were doing. So our vision is to unite and leverage the expertise, impact and influence of the HRCs to effectively bring together what all of them are doing, to give them one voice and to use that voice to try and enact some real systemic change in terms of how the ecosystem works. And we use a federated approach to do that. So this is how our federated approach, the structure works. So as you can see, we have got three main pillars of work streams that apply to all of the HRCs, and we have these three cross-cutting themes as well. PPIE and RI, obviously the one we're going to talk about today. Each of the HRCs are involved in the governance and structure in how the network delivers on its objectives and vision. And we have, so how it works, we have all 14 feed into each of these work streams. And each work stream has these 3 or 4 centres where there's expertise in that area. They are autonomous steering groups that are able to do work and deliver outputs and to deliver procedures and various other things that the work streams need. And they then validate what they're doing with this distributed governance, which is all of the HRCs. So essentially all 14 HRCs feed into autonomous groups that deliver some outputs, and then we validate that with all of the people who are involved in the system. So it means that we're able to have some really quick and agile solutions to problems that we want to tackle nationally and across all of our network. So the benefits to doing this is that we were able to centralize resources from all of the 14. So where previously each HRC operated relatively independently, the network in this federated structure enables us to bring all of that expertise together so we can have some central resources for training, for procedures, and for any other things. So like with PPIE and RI, for example, we can try and sort of have a more sort of consistent process for how we deliver that and how we use the resources that we've got. We are able to collectively identify national and also regional priorities and work together to co-produce solutions for those. We are able to innovate the process of inclusion and involvement for patients and for the people, the contributors who are involved in that. We can connect our communities nationally, so we've got a deeper reach into where we need to get those that input. And collectively, we have a collective impact that allows us to have a single, harmonized, unified voice, which essentially gives us more influence more generally. So I'm going to hand over to Greta, who's going to talk specifically about PPIE and how we do that.
Thank you, Simone. That's great. So moving into our patient and public involvement and engagement, or PPIE, and research inclusion workstream in a bit more detail. Our focus really is on that national level coordination, as Simone's already mentioned, and the opportunity to establish our HealthTech Research Centre network, we hope, as an exemplar for how we can really meaningfully involve the public and communities in HealthTech research and innovation. And by coming together, we're really hopeful about having a greater impact than we can do individually, and particularly around working in ways that help address current health inequalities and that embrace diversity. So this might all sound quite abstract at the moment, so just to share a bit about what this has looked like so far over the last 9 months that we've been working together in this work stream, is we first of all carried out a survey inviting public involvement and research inclusion leads from each of the HealthTech research centres to shape the work stream. Some might say we wouldn't be good involvement and engagement practitioners if we didn't practice what we preach. So we asked people about their existing knowledge, assets and skills, and identified opportunities and priorities for that collaboration that Simone's mentioned. The survey illustrated positively that we're really fortunate to have some strong foundations for collaborating together. Most of our HealthTech research centres responded, and they described having lots of existing experience and connections and relationships that could support us to do some really good and meaningful work together. We also came together for an in-person event in summer in lovely Sheffield to meet, share and prioritise what we would focus our collective learning and work upon. And discussions on that day have formed the basis of 4 initial priority areas, which I'll say a bit more about in just a second, but they also focused are the focus of a network level PPIE strategy. So we're trying to be organised and thoughtful about our approach in working together. So one priority area I identified is about how we value and reward the public partners who generously give their time and their share their lived experiences to help shape the health tech we're all working on. And for this, we had discussions about thinking beyond the very important payments for public involvement that our funders recommend and encourage us to do and we have in place. but delivering a wider range of additional opportunities to offer people who come to work with us, to support the reciprocal nature of our relationships with the public, and also have a longer lasting legacy of their involvement with us. What this might look like so far, we're very much in the early days, but across the HRCs, we've already got some great examples of how people have offered members of the public opportunities to develop themselves, develop their skills, build their CVs, and perhaps just have different life experiences that really offer something to them that they value. Exactly what these additional offers are going to look like, obviously we're going to work closely with our public partners to shape these ideas about what would be valuable to them. Another priority area we've identified is supporting innovators with public involvement and engagement. So as HealthTech research centres, we work with innovators from industry, academia and other spaces who are at various stages of development in their technology. And PPIE, public involvement and engagement, has an important role at all of those stages. And those innovators also bring different levels of experience, of course, in working with the public and patients to develop their technology. So a further shared aim of ours is to really pull together our experience and expertise across our different HealthTech research centres to support innovators to learn about the value of public involvement activity and really invest in it and develop their own skills and capacity to do that. So this might include us developing PPIE training for innovators, but also perhaps better articulating stories or case studies where public involvement has really shaped or even reshaped the development of an innovation, sometimes even mitigating against the product failing to meet a need despite everybody's best efforts, and consequently helping to make success and adoption of technology much more likely if it's had that public input from the earliest stages. Just to explain that a little bit more, an example is around understanding what works from a patient perspective to inform product design. So for example, we can optimize a new technology based on what really matters to patients, such as for a new rapid diagnostic test for infection, what time to getting a result from that test is actually acceptable to patients and is going to work for them. Or even avoiding a blind alley, if you like, such as a rehabilitation device that's, again, developed with great innovation and ideas, but that might in reality be too complex or time-consuming for people to set up and use in their day-to-day lives. And we really want to help innovators to kind of learn about those kinds of stories and apply them in their own, apply PPIE in their own work. A further priority for our work stream is about growing our connections with communities together. So as HRCs, that we have lots of existing activity to engage with communities in flexible and fluid ways to enable more diverse involvement. But we think we've got great potential to collaborate to help us better include more and different voices. Across our centres, we're really keen to understand who we're connected to together, but also who's not round the table, who we're missing at the moment, who aren't we well connected to, and to collaborate to reach those communities currently not well represented in health tech research. We also think we've got great opportunity to learn from each other, to use the most successful approaches and avoid overburdening certain communities. And an important aspect of all this work will be capturing the growth and impact of our public involvement and inclusion work through things like equality monitoring, being one way we can monitor the success of us working with a wide range of people. So in summary, the HealthTech Research Network is enabling us to come together as 14 research centres to drive meaningful and impactful work together, and in this work stream with people and communities in a more coordinated and strategic way. We're keen to leverage our resources, strengths and assets to widen and sustain relationships with a broader range of public and have a greater impact in helping to address health inequalities. We're also keen to utilise our collective voice in a stronger way to advocate for change with national decision makers where it's needed to fully realise the benefits of involving the public in health tech research and innovation. just to say thank you for listening. We really look forward to sharing more about this work as it progresses, and just to acknowledge that the thoughts and work in this presentation represent the centres that we work with, not just ourselves. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. This is a question for Greta. I really like the slide where you present the framework with the TRLs, the technology readiness levels, and at which point that insight from PPIE would be coming in. And I wonder, is it published? Can we cite it? Can we reference it? Because it's the first time I've seen this, and this is so needed that it's a really valuable resource. If we could link into it.
That's really useful feedback, yeah, and I have to say I personally take no credit for that. That's a piece of work by our colleague Lise Sprosen on there, so we can certainly put you in touch with her. Let's have a chat after. But that's like an example of a resource that we're wondering might be useful for innovators to be aware of. So that's really useful to us, and yeah, feel free to catch us for a chat after. We're sorry we didn't put our contact email on the slides, but we do have our HealthTech Research Centre's got a stand outside, and Simone and I are around today if anyone wants to catch us, to stay in touch.
We've got time for one more quick question. It's good that you guys have done Dawn's homework already.
That was such a great presentation, thank you. I think when it comes to like the early, like immature tech where it's research and it's publications, it's really easy, like people explicitly declare the PPIE involvement. When it comes to product development where it's like direct to consumer, it's so difficult. So do you have any tips on like signals to help us understand where people have used patient-public involvement to develop their product?
I think it's a really good question. Locally we've just been working on our initial contact form, which we use for innovators to reach out to us to collaborate on projects, and we've incorporated a broad question about public involvement in that, just to understand where people are at. I think it is about asking, how much have patients, asking that question really early doors about where these ideas have come from and how much they've been sense checked, either through a public involvement activity, but there's also sources of information out there, public priority setting exercises that can be drawn upon for that kind of thing. So even if people haven't done activity themselves, I think it's about that part of their process, having brought that perspective into their idea development is what I would suggest, but happy to have a chat afterwards as well. I think it's a really good question.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Super talk, well done. Super, thanks very much. So, sorry, one thing I should have mentioned at the start, and I forgot to, my apologies, is that there are prizes, excitingly, for the best oral presentation, lightning presentation, and poster. So as you go along, voting will take place tomorrow afternoon. So please, as you go along, take a note of which your favourite presentations are. Mine's tomorrow. So yes, please join me in welcoming to the stage Flavia.
Thank you all. My name is Flavia. I'm from the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and I'm going to present to you some work that we have been doing with data from the Health Technology Assessment Organ institution in Brazil, that is the CONITEC. Of course, we all know that the management of health systems with universal healthcare coverage is a challenge subject. And of course, we know it benefits from horizontal scanning and health technology assessment, especially when we have government budget constraints that may be affected by the incorporation of new technologies. And in Brazil, we have been dealing with some financial issues due to policy practices that neglect the regulatory frameworks imposed for health technology assessment and incorporation of new technologies. First of all, let me give you some background on the Brazilian health system. We have a private part of the health system that covers approximately 20 to 25% of the population, and the remaining 75 to 80% is covered by the public sector and is free of charge for patients and supported by taxes and contributions. In this case, high-cost medicines that go into this public sector part, they are covered also by taxes and contributions, and they have to be approved by the National Commission for Health Technology Incorporation, the CONITEC, that also makes horizon scanning and health technology assessment for all new technologies that are going to be incorporated to the public part. That is, to these medications and other technologies that will be offered for free to the population that has no conditions to assume the payment for these new technologies and medications. One part of this provision of high-cost pharmaceuticals is made through the specialized component of pharmaceutical assistant that we call CEAF. What have we done? We have made an inventory of all health technology assessment requirements made for CONITEC within the last 13 to 14 years, and try to identify practices that were generating disruptions into the regulatory framework that is imposed for horizon scanning and health technology assessment. And the objectives were to identify the cases of medicine distribution prior to approval, evaluation of factors that were linked to this early distribution of medicines, and appraisal of the time lag between demand and approval of medicines when we had the proper evaluation submission procedures being addressed. So it was a retrospective study of cases involving health technology assessment demand to CONITEC, and the data sources were the CEAF itself, that is Registry of Medicines Distribution on the public healthcare facilities in Brazil from 2012 to 2024, and also linking these registries of medicine distribution to the processes initiated for incorporation of the corresponding medicines that ranged from 2010 to 2024, and decisions for approval of incorporation to the health system. In this case, our primary objective was only to analyze the process of incorporation after health technology assessment demands were posed to CONITEC, but we were surprised to see that lots of medications were being distributed through the public health system without the approval, without proper acknowledgement of the whole regulatory system. And then we also thought, why not perform an analysis of what it's driving this kind of practices on the bureaucratic level, on the street level, bureaucracy level. So we have the date of the first registry of the distribution of the medicines at the state level. And from CONITEC, we obtained the date of the demand submission and the date of final approval for incorporation to the public system, and some details of the processes to see whether or not there were some drivers to early distribution before approval, and also after approval, how much time it was required for the medications that were not being distributed prior to approval, how much time did it take to reach the population. And also included data from the diagnosis that this medication were prescribed for, and details on the applicant that made this demand for CONITEC to make the health technology assessment. And we performed a statistical analysis based on Cox regression models. So we found out that the distribution prior to approval of incorporation comprised 25% of the cases of medicines, high-cost medicines. So 25% of medicines were being distributed prior to proper approval from CONITEC, prior to health technology assessment and budget impact analysis and other things like that. Some people could argue that maybe they were demanded through judicial actions, for example, because in Brazil, we have this mechanism that some patients require a medication through the public health system without payment through the judicial system. And sometimes judges acknowledge that this is a right for those patients, ignoring all the procedures of budget impact analysis and other things like that. And we have had some problems with that. For example, some judges decided on favoring some demands, patients' demands that were higher than the whole state budget, for example. And then they have to avert this decision later. So in general, there were medicines being distributed more than 1 year, or more than, I think, 3 to 5 years prior to approval from the CONITEC. And the delaying approval was linked, the delaying approval in submitting the demand to approval was linked from demands made by the federal government. That is, when the federal government required to the CONITEC to evaluate this new medication, this demand was delayed a lot. There were higher delays in approval of this, in the supply of, between the supply of the medication and the requirements to start the demand of health technology evaluation, and also prescriptions for treatment of metabolic diseases. On the other hand, when CONITEC was required to evaluate this medication prior to initiation of the distribution, the time for evaluation was required was approximately 261 days, plus or less 251 days. That is approximately 1 year or more to evaluate the new technology before incorporating to the public health system, which is in violation also to the legislation that requires, if I'm not mistaken, 91 days plus or less, plus another 90 days for evaluation. And the delay in approval was linked to some diagnoses of this that were linked to this medication. For example, chronic kidney diseases were a medication that was highly delayed in terms of decision for incorporation to the public system, neurological issues and hematological issues also. That is, we have some challenges to the implementation of the regulatory framework in Brazil. We have policy practices that prevail over legal instruments in general in Brazil. That renders the implementation of health technology assessment and horizon scanning efforts invalid, because you cannot put in practice something that the public sector itself is ignoring from the beginning. And the federal government demands were potentially representing some corrective actions to try to acknowledge that there were distribution of these medications that were already taking place in the public health system, although without proper evaluation. And health policy signaling in delay of health technology decisions shows that there is some obstruction of demands connected to the government priorities. For example, chronic kidney diseases are highly costly to the public health system, and only the public health system in Brazil receives patients from chronic health diseases because of the higher costs. And when you delay the incorporation of new technology, new medication for treatment of those diseases, you have some losses in the public budget itself. And the negligence on health conditions linked to high-cost treatments imposes lots of losses to the public sector budgets in Brazil. So the research team involved in this research was myself, and my master student Rogério, and my colleague Ana Amélia. And the study was funded by FAPESP and CNPq. And thank you for your... Do some questions? I guess nobody wants to know how much the Brazilian government doesn't follow its own rules. If anyone has any questions on that afterwards, you can address to me, to my email. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much.
I have to say, for me, that was fascinating, and it was a really useful insight to see how another part of the world operates in this space. Do you have any estimates on how much this cost the Brazilian government?
No, but it's a really good idea to perform a new study on how much it costs, because we were deeply surprised by the fact that some of these medications were being distributed prior to evaluation. So we were doing the study on how long does it take from the health technology assessment demand to the incorporation to the health system, to the public health system, because we have a law that says that we must supply this medication at most, I think, 180 days after approval. And we were surprised to see that there were medications being distributed prior to approval. So we are going to take your idea on how much it costs. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks very much. We've kept the time so well, so thank you very much, everyone, for doing that. Just before I welcome our final speaker to the stage, if I could just ask everyone to check that their phones are on silent, because I've heard a couple of pings, so please do that. So please welcome our final speaker to the stage, Azu.
Hello, everyone. So I'm very conscious that I'm standing here between you and your break, your tea break, and also that everyone has kept to time, so there's even more pressure on me now to keep to time. Let's take up the challenge. So I'm Arzu Ahmed. I'm Director of Ethics at Our Future Health. I'll be speaking in the next few minutes about our strategies at Our Future Health for embedding ethics and involvement across this national scale research program. This is slightly more upstream than the presentations you've already heard, which are more kind of around the regulations and the wider ecosystem. I'll be talking specifically about how horizon scanning approaches have helped us to anticipate ethical issues and involve our participants at the right stages in our program. So for a bit of context, for those of you who may not be familiar with the program, Our Future Health is a not-for-profit organization. We have the aim of recruiting 5 million adults from across the UK to take part in what is a prospective cohort study with the aim of transforming the prevention, detection, and treatment of diseases through research. Over the last 3 years, we've managed to recruit 2.5 million participants. They have consented through this primarily digital program, and we have maintained a very important focus on diversity throughout our recruitment. We collect blood samples. We genotype those blood samples with a SNP array. We collect some physical measurements at a clinic appointment and ask our participants to complete a baseline questionnaire, which is quite long. And we also seek consent from our participants to link to health-related data sets. The size and relevance of the data allows us to provide population-level health insights, and as part of that, to eventually, hopefully, inform evidence-based policy. By enabling our researchers to access stored biosamples and also to get back in touch with our participants and invite them to further trials and additional studies, we're really aiming to focus on translational research and how it is that we can enable new forms of research to be carried out. Participants give what I think something that's quite particularly unique about Our Future Health is that from the outset, participants give their consent to be recontacted based not only on information that they already know about themselves, but also information that we might discover through the genetic data that's generated from their samples. You will have seen in the 10-year health plan recently that Our Future Health is also mentioned in relation to working more closely with the NHS on prevention and returning risk scores to participants. So that's another new area of work that's currently being developed. So before we turn to some of the ethical challenges that arise at Our Future Health, I thought it might be helpful for us to take a step back and look at some of the big picture ethical issues and trends in the broader research and clinical ecosystem and look at how things are evolving. And these are some of the trends that we've identified through kind of futures thinking, horizon scanning, and engaging with our stakeholders. And the first thing is that the nature of medicine is shifting. It's changing much more towards this increasingly large-scale, data-driven, collaborative endeavor. It means that as individuals, we rely not only on our data, but also on knowledge of the data of others to understand what is important to us about our health. What used to be very distinct and separate domains of research here and clinical over here are now becoming much more hybrid in practice, so that those lines between research and clinical are effectively blurring, and it's not as easy now to separate the two. And you'll probably be familiar with the idea of learning health systems, but these are precisely the characteristics of these kinds of systems. The nature of information that we're now looking to present to patients, to participants, carries with it much more uncertainty, much more open-endedness, particularly with the incorporation of genomic data and the new possibilities that that opens up. This ends up having an impact on consent because previously we had these standards of consent where you set out everything before the patient or the participant. But now we know that not everything can be shared at that initial stage. So we find ourselves in a position where consent alone cannot do all of the work, and we need to think about new strategies of how we keep in touch with our participants, how we set and manage expectations to ensure that over time, being open to new kinds of information that you weren't anticipating and expecting can be built into the systems and those relationships. And with the pace of development that we're seeing and the new possibilities that are being unlocked, particularly in research with the combination of AI, but also genomic data, there is a push to go beyond traditional research models within medicine. And so it's important for us to think, as these new forms of innovation come to the fore, how do we maintain the safety of participants, but also uphold that public trust? And how can we adapt regulatory and governance systems to enable those things to flourish whilst not kind of inhibiting what could be possible? Turning to Our Future Health, our ethics and governance framework was one of the first documents that was compiled by an expert group even before Our Future Health existed. So this approach of stopping to think ahead and anticipate and imagine what could happen is what Our Future Health was built upon. So before the organization was operationalized, this document came to be compiled and has effectively guided us in the program for what it is that we should be thinking about each day. The framework anticipated a huge range of ethical issues which have guided the program, but in the course of the delivery of that program, we've also come across many new issues, not just by engaging with our teams, but also by engaging with our stakeholders and hearing from our participants. Touching on a few of these things here, the nature of consent in the Our Future Health program is quite challenging. We take broad consent from participants, and effectively they don't know in the future what information they'll be receiving about their health. So there's a lot of trust that's being placed in the program. We are trying to enable recontact studies. So these are further additional studies where researchers come to us and say, you know, I want to contact these 100 participants who have the BRCA variant. Participants will not have this information. So we're really having to think about how we can enable this recontact to take place in a way that respects people's wishes not to know information, but also respects people's openness as well to research in ways that we might not anticipate. We have another area of Our Future Health which is around risk prediction and generating health insights. This brings with it lots of ethical challenges because, again, we're not only still conducting and doing the research, but then we're looking to give that information back to participants. And that's really, really important to get right and think about very carefully in relation also to the wider health ecosystem and how it is that the NHS and health stakeholders may be ready or not for this kind of shift towards sharing much more health information with the public. And from a regulatory perspective, you know, we've started discussions very early, like 3 years ago with the MHRA, with the HRA and others, to start anticipating how it is that we can best deliver these aspects of the program when we get there. So research programs and projects are now moving towards strengthening and enhancing the ethical character of their programs by thinking about ethics beyond the minimum bar of research ethics approvals and compliance. Research ethics is a necessary step to ensure compliance, but it's not necessarily sufficient to ensure that your overall program is ethically robust, because that requires thinking about design, programming, the impact of your program delivery, but also thinking about ongoing decision-making and prioritization to facilitate that ethical delivery of your activities. And so whilst the research ethics review is a one-time review before research begins, we at Our Future Health have taken an approach to embedding ethics, which ensures a continuous ethics review of our activities and the impact of that not only on our participants, but also on the wider health ecosystem. And it ensures, for us, it has ensured that ethics is a very early part of conversations with our product teams, our tech and design teams, and that it's informed through ongoing engagement and co-design with our participants. And this broader approach to ethics considers not just the research questions that you're undertaking, but also your governance structures, your policies, your processes, and any program decisions that are undertaken. We have, in the last year, taken a novel approach to engaging with the HRA, where I think we had submitted about 20 amendments in the course of a few months. And we've now developed a new boundaried way of research ethics approvals, which I don't have time to talk about now, but hopefully we'll be able to share at some point in the future. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but it's just to demonstrate to you all of the different functions in our ethics team at Our Future Health, which also includes the involvement department. So PPIE is not something that sits outside of ethics on its own. It's actually woven into the team. And we have a team of 7 now of experts across all of those different areas. We have also an ethics advisory board as part of our governance structures, a public advisory board who we meet with very regularly to discuss any new ideas that are evolving in the program. And through operational ethics, which I think takes up most of our time, we ensure that an ethics by design approach is taken at Our Future Health when new activities are being developed. We also engage in horizon scanning as part of our anticipatory ethics approach to ensure that we're thinking about new futures that we as Our Future Health may end up in, but also futures that we may end up creating. And the longer term implications of some of the decisions that we're taking, not only on our participants, but also on the ecosystem. So a little bit on PPIE. PPIE is a voice in our program that's woven throughout all our activities. It ensures that our participant and public interests are constantly shaping the program from the core. We've developed different methods and strategies of doing this and involving and engaging publics meaningfully. I don't have time to go into all of these, but I will say that our PPIE work is often the thing that begins first. So for the recontact and feedback areas of the program, they're only just being operationalized now, but we started our PPIE work 2 to 3 years ago. So through the PPIE work, we identify areas and themes that we then share with our product tech design teams, who then take those things on board and then continue that cycle as we go. And we've really felt the value of incorporating those views throughout every aspect of our program. Anticipating future ethics and equity issues at Our Future Health, the use of AI in our environments, but also the use of AI in generating new health information for our participants, the incorporation of genomic information into people's clinical records, what would happen with federated data sets and how can we enable those with the consent that we have, but also what happens to our participants when they lose capacity and how is it that we can keep them engaged or allow them to continue benefiting from research without effectively excluding them from research. And I think I'm on to my last slide, which is some key insights and learnings on ethics and involvement from Our Future Health. And the first is that robust and early engagement with ethical questions and a timely involvement of the public and participants adds value to research. It supports trusted relationships to develop, but also helps us with ethical preparedness and mitigates risks, both practical and reputational. Research ethics committees and approvals are really important for compliance and mitigating harm, but embedding ethics supports us with a culture of research integrity and enhancing some of those ethical standards. The digital health research space is facilitating innovation and agility within the research process, and it promises a lot of potential for translation, and it's also changing the health ecosystem, but this requires adaptation of regulatory processes and possibly the development of new ethical tools to enable us to navigate these issues. And finally, ethics, equity, and engagement and involvement are all very core components for ensuring that research discoveries can truly impact and benefit everyone across the population. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. And I've left you no time for questions, conveniently.
Bang on as it hit 0, so well done.
It's literally on 0, yeah, thank you.
That was super. I think because we are heading now into the tea break, I think we won't take questions now, but do come and find our Zoo if you want to ask any questions. Yes, go and do that in the tea break. So it just remains me to say thank you all to all of your speakers for opening this conference with a series of really excellent talks. Thank you for that. And as a reminder, please do note your favourite for the voting tomorrow. We now have a short break. Please be back in here at 2:30 so we can start the panel on time. We've kept really well to time, so thank you very much to everyone for doing that. Just remains me to close the session, so please join me in thanking our speakers one more time.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone managed to grab some quick refreshments ahead of our next session. I'll try to move this along quickly because I know we're a little bit behind on time. But I'd like to introduce our next panel, From Moonshot to Market, Innovation, Implementation and Impact. And I'll now pass you over to Sarah to introduce the rest of the panel.
Right, thanks very much. Welcome to the panel, where we'll hear from 3 experts. I'll introduce them in a moment. And with them, we're going to explore the complexities, technological, ethical, social, and practical, of innovation, implementation, and impact. So how does a great idea make its way to market in the public, private, or third sector? What constitutes a good idea in the first place, and from whose perspective? How do we combine the creativity so essential to the beneficial and transformative potential of innovation with the pragmatic and sometimes mundane requirements of our healthcare system to support people's health and well-being? So I'm looking forward to hearing what our panellists think, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to join the debate through Q&A, assuming that we stick to time, but there's a monitor over there so I can look at that. So let me introduce the panel online. So behind me, but I'm absolutely assured, well, you can all see Claire. Not yet, you will in a minute, I think, there. And Claire can see the panel. So it's only the panel that can't see Claire, so I won't keep turning around, even though I feel like I ought to be turning around. So Claire, welcome. Claire Kidgell is Deputy Director of Horizon Scanning, Demand Signalling and Innovation Business Development at NHS England. So welcome, and we're very glad you can join us. I hope you can hear and see us fine.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry I can't be with you in person today, but lovely to be here.
Good. And here with me on stage, to my immediate left, Brian Jones, Senior Improvement Fellow at the Health Foundation, and then on my far left, Jacob Lant, Chief Executive from National Voices. So welcome to you both too. So let's get down to work with my first question. The question shouldn't be taking the panel completely by surprise. Your questions definitely will, so start thinking of those now. So the first question, and this is to Jacob first, but I'll ask the other panel members to contribute should they wish. So what should drive and shape innovation? Moonshot thinking, as it's called, is that component of that creativity to ensure transformation in health and healthcare. So what about these drivers and shapers?
Thank you. I'm Jacob and I'm from National Voices. If you've not come across us before, we're a coalition of health and social care charities, very much working with people with health conditions, but also people from different communities, often those who have experienced health inequalities. So I'm going to take this question from the user perspective. I guess the way I interpreted it is I looked at the NHS 10-year plan and all of the public engagement that had been done in that, about what the public was saying they wanted from the future of the NHS and from innovation. And the strongest message coming through in all that engagement is we need to focus more on getting the basics right. Particularly in that shift around analog to digital, which I think is particularly relevant here. So the public and patients don't particularly trust us at the moment when we talk about fancy innovations of genomics and AI and robotics, when we keep sending them appointment letters after their appointment took place, right? That's fundamentally we've failed to build their trust in our ability to do innovation well. So I would start with actually what is it that people want us to fix? And that means involving them very much in that demand signalling work that we talked about at the beginning in the earlier sessions, about a real gap there about what matters to people. And then there's the point about involving people in the design. We heard a little bit about that in each of the presentations earlier, but actually the contributions that users will make to a product, to its product development, from the initial idea generation through to refining it to getting it delivered into the market, will fundamentally make something that actually works, as opposed to a lot of the other innovations that we have that sometimes fail at their first hurdle. So even if you take something basic like online or remote GP appointments and the booking of those, if you'd involve people in the process of developing that system, there's no way we'd have booking websites turn off when essentially they get too busy, right? We would have people involved in designing systems that work for them. And then lastly, what I'll say on this is about the evaluation. So too often we put innovations into the ecosystem, and then we don't actually track how that's really working in the real world for people. Why is uptake not as good as it is, and actually how can we refine or improve uptake? And that's where involving people in that, in like a really extended life cycle of innovation is so critical.
Thanks very much. So I did ask you to go first precisely because we need to put the patient and public at the centre here, and I think the talks earlier this afternoon kind of reinforced that as well. Claire, I wonder if you want to come in here about this kind of getting the basics right, and thinking a little bit about what that means in terms of innovation.
Sure, thanks. So I guess coming at it from the system perspective, sitting in NHS England, it's already been mentioned the 10-year health plan and the life sciences sector plan. So they really are setting the strategic direction for NHS England in terms of where there needs to be big changes and ambitions around innovation to improve outcomes and improve the system. And I think sort of picking up on the points made about getting the basics right, it's probably worth noting that within the 10-year health plan, you may have spotted reference to modern service frameworks and a commitment to develop modern service frameworks in a small number of clinical areas where there is a huge need. So the first one will be around cardiovascular disease, and that will be followed by sepsis, severe mental illness, and then frailty and dementia. And the reason for mentioning these is that there is a big ambition around those modern service frameworks to really improve outcomes. So for cardiovascular disease, there's a big ambition to essentially reduce premature mortality by 25% from heart disease in the next 10 years. And the way that will be done is by setting out through the modern service frameworks what are the best pathways and what are the best care pathways now, so what are the best evidence interventions that we should be using in the system, but also looking to the future as well. So really thinking about where are those future innovations to really make sure that patients have the best outcomes that they deserve within the healthcare setting. So there is a big focus on that horizon scanning piece around the next 3, 5, 10 years. And patients will be at the heart of that, and patients are front and centre in terms of making sure that we are setting out what best care should look like, but also making sure that they receive the best care in the future as well.
So it does sound like innovation can go hand in hand with getting the basics right, actually, because we often think of innovation as something kind of new and shiny, doing things very differently. Brian, would you agree with that or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there is one of the big risks we have at the moment is that innovation is seen very much as tech, AI, and as the Health Foundation is very interested in those areas, but they are not the only things. So, for example, we need to think about kind of process improvements. We need to think about how we redesign systems. We need to think to optimize existing systems and actually think about things that aren't working. So the kind of failure demands you might have in the system. So redesigning systems, thinking about those basic kind of change kind of methods and approaches we need to do that is fundamental. And then there's also something about, coming back to Jacob's point, thinking about the kind of the basic nature of the interaction between patient, service user, and professional. There's an awful lot of transactional care in the system at the moment where people, it's not focused on the kind of the needs, what matters most to patients. And that kind of alienates, I think, people from their kind of own kind of professional motivations. So getting those kind of basics right, thinking fundamentally about what care is, why it's being provided, how it's being provided, where it's being provided, is so critical to this. So I think it comes back to when we think about innovation, we need to think about it in the kind of in the broadest possible terms, to think about everything that's happening in the system, and we shouldn't lose sight of those kind of basic elements.
Okay, so systems thinking along with that sense of where does the individual fit in this system and what's the experience like from them. So that takes very nicely to my next question. So this is, Claire can have a first stab at this. So we know that there are lots of good ideas around. We all have them all the time, even if we're not innovators. What kind of evidence is needed to help the development of ideas and innovations that are likely to be transformative for healthcare?
Thanks, Sarah. So in thinking about this question, I guess two aspects to it. So why does evidence matter? And then what evidence do we need? So ultimately, we need evidence because we need to know where to target innovation. So we don't just want to do innovation for innovation's sake, and it goes back to the point of making sure we're doing it for the patients and the ultimate aim to improve outcomes for them and for the wider system. So we need to know where to target innovation. So we need the evidence to tell us where the pinch points are in the system and where potentially innovation can start to improve and alleviate some of those pinch points. So ultimately, we're looking for the right solution for the right people at the right time is where we want to get to. Then we really want to see innovation make measurable improvements. We're not really looking for incremental changes. We want to see those measurable improvements. We need evidence to demonstrate that. So when we're thinking about innovations within the healthcare setting, fundamentally, the biggest thing we need evidence around is safety. So we want to make sure that whatever innovation we're implementing is safe and there aren't any unintended consequences of putting innovation into a particular care pathway or a particular clinical specialty area. We need to know whether it's effective, we need to know whether it works. We need evidence to know whether it's affordable. So we can have the best innovations in the world, but if they aren't affordable in the system, it's not helpful. So we need evidence around whether they're affordable. And really importantly, we need to know whether they're equitable and whether they're acceptable to patients and to the NHS staff and the wider system. So if we're thinking, as we are at the moment, moving a lot of sort of digital by default and sort of point-of-care testing and medtech innovations, we really want to make sure, and we need to really be absolutely certain that we're not widening inequalities and we're not lessening the patient's experience and patient acceptability of some of these solutions. And then ultimately, after all of that, we need to see whether it actually works in real world settings. So within NHS England, we work really closely with NICE and with colleagues at NIHR because I think we can probably all recount many instances of what looks like a really promising innovation in a very controlled environment when it's actually put into the system doesn't deliver as you expect it to. So we really want to make sure we've got that real world evidence. So just a quick example as a case study. So AI in dermatology is an area of interest at the moment. So dermatology services are under increasing pressure, increasing numbers of referrals. There is a need to think about how you can alleviate some of that pressure in that particular pathway. So through some early funding from NHS around an AI award, there's AI development now that can analyse skin lesions essentially, so start to implement that within the dermatology care pathways. So really some early funding that started to show that this technology looked like it was promising, looked like it was delivering what it was supposed to be delivering. And then to the point where there was sufficient confidence that NICE agreed that this particular technology could be covered under a NICE EVA. So for those of you who aren't aware, a NICE Early Value Assessment, which essentially means that the technology can be used within the system for a short period of time on the understanding that additional evidence is generated to support those longer term then decisions around whether this is something that should be commissioned. So the NICE EVA is in place now for this particular technology, so the AI in the dermatology pathway. Still evidence gaps around diagnostic accuracy, so really important in this space to make sure that this technology is accurate across different skin tones, but also what's the impact on face-to-face appointments? Does it actually do what it's expected to do? And ultimately, does it actually start to improve sort of cancer detection and earlier detection of potential cancers in dermatology? So it's now deployed in 20 sites across England. I think really exciting, and hopefully the evidence will be generated and help NICE in its decision. But I think a nice example there of where the mantra we sort of work along is around sort of detect, develop and deploy. So a nice example there of where we've detected a problem in the system, we supported the development of a potential solution, and then we've deployed it to see whether it works in practice.
Thanks very much. Good to think about that example. And obviously you're making a case of quite appropriately for continuous monitoring here and improve and undo if necessary and change practice. But that example of dermatology is also an area where there was prior innovation, so a kind of use of digital technologies and online consultations and photographs and things. So the patient community might also be a little more aware of that possibility as a way of moving forward as well. So some of that groundwork was already there, I guess, in that innovation space. I'm going to move to Brian now, because I think this idea of kind of continuous improvement is absolutely key to kind of health systems and health systems thinking. So
So the challenges of implementing anything new are considerable. We all know that. And yet alone something that may be radically different to how things have been done until now. And that's often the case with some of the most promissory innovations that we might be talking about. So what groundwork needs to be done to enable successful implementation?
Yeah, no, it's such an important point, isn't it? Because I think when we think about innovation, sometimes we think about the kind of the core components of a particular intervention. We think about the kind of the very start of that journey. We think about the innovation itself. We don't necessarily focus as much about kind of implementation, adoption and spread of interventions. And the people who do that kind of work are so crucial to kind of any kind of success and change within healthcare. There are so many kind of components that kind of contribute to a kind of effective kind of ecosystem for change. And for me, it's one of the most important things, particularly in a system that, the NHS in this country looks upwards. It's the kind of leadership behaviours you have in place. So those leadership behaviours, attributes, mindsets are so critical to creating that kind of context and culture for change. So, for example, one thing is critical is like outward facingness, the extent to which organisations are looking outwards. Do they have the humility to kind of think about what other people are doing well? How do they pull that information back into the system? How do they kind of use it? How do they implement it? And it's interesting, a lot of organisations under pressure, that's one of the first things that goes. They become very inward-looking, they kind of focus on what they do well, they're not looking externally. So that's a really important characteristic of successful kind of improvement-led organisations. There's something also about kind of balance. So it's like we talk about this idea of ambidexterity. So your ability to focus on today's business, what happens now, current operational priorities, and balancing that with your future needs, which is in the kind of innovation and improvement space. So when we don't get that balance right, when the latter is squeezed out by the current pressures, and there are so many pressures at the moment, then that's when we kind of fail to kind of get to embed change. So getting that kind of balance, split screen thinking, as some leaders are now calling it, is so important. And then there's something about the mindsets you want to inculcate within your organisation. For example, we need to have less kind of heroic leaders. We need to think about kind of creating the kind of space for people to make change themselves. So inculcating kind of psychological safety, creating that sense of curiosity, and also something really important about risk. Because at the moment in a lot of healthcare systems, we're not good at thinking about kind of risk. It's easier sometimes to hold on to the status quo, even though that itself is risky, rather than thinking about the future. So getting that balance right and thinking about a kind of risk appetite in the system is so important. And I think increasing number of people are thinking about that. There's also something, I think, about consolidation, because we've talked about innovation, we've talked about continuous improvement. There's organisational development, there's digital transformation. There are changes happening from so many sides in organisations at the moment. And a lot of resources being kind of duplicated, and in silos, and we're not making the case for kind of bringing that together, that kind of change energy you have in organisations, which seems so critical to kind of making change. And then there's something, I think, obviously capability. We've talked about that a lot already today. But the basic kind of getting sort of process improvement, how do you get the change methodologies, making sure people understand that, making sure people can then use those skills in practice, because there's a lot of capability building, but then people don't have the means to actually to embed that in their own practice. So making sure they can do that, making sure they've got the space to do that, and that in many cases means that your managers, frontline managers in organisations who are critical to change, but often don't have the time to get involved in that, giving people permission to go and do that. So there's a few things. I mean, there are a lot more things we could talk about if we had another hour, but I think that's just a few key things.
So thanks very much. But you've identified kind of a key challenge that is kind of deeply cultural in terms of systems, having the time to think strategically about change while dealing with the day-to-day overstressed NHS. So we'll throw that out to everybody because that is something that we really have to solve before moving forward. Jacob, how can patients and the public support that, I suppose, that process of change that would enable leadership to be embracing of different ways of thinking, different ways of understanding risk, and actually finding time to think about or craft a future that's more equitable?
It's a big question. I was sat there thinking about the question, the previous point about evidence and how that relates to that question. Obviously, collecting the right evidence for an innovation is really, really important, and particularly where it's a clinical intervention, we want to make sure it's safe. That was the point made earlier, safety is critical. But sometimes I think the burden of capturing level of evidence is a blocker on innovation. There are sometimes things from a user perspective that are so blindingly obvious as a thing that could make an improvement. And I suspect it would be the same for frontline managers. The example that's stuck in my head is, have you ever been to a restaurant or like a food hall where you get those vibrating monitor things that tell you when your order's up, right? So there was a hospital, I think it was in Dudley, was using that to tell patients in A&E when they were being called. So you had a call out, say your name, you had the name on the kind of the reader at the top, and also you got your vibrating machine. And it helped as an innovation because it supported people who've got sensory impairments, of course, communicating with them in multiple different formats. It also helped people who had popped out to put more money in the parking meter. It helped people who'd gone to find a drink whilst they were waiting there, or gone to the toilet. All these people who'd come back and were uncertain whether they'd missed their slot in A&E. It was a sort of like a no-brainer innovation, and it was, and there was the feedback in the A&E department was brilliant, really positive. Can that get replicated anywhere else? No, because everyone else wants to see the evidence of how it's made a clinical difference to the workflow in the A&E. So something about the burden of evidence we put in place is like, we shouldn't have the same bar for every type of innovation, and that flexibility is something where I think the public involvement really helps the system understand the risk level of that innovation being introduced. What is the risk level for introducing that? It's pretty low. What's the benefits of it? Potentially pretty high in ironing out some of those frustrations in A&E. And so I think that's something I think we could do more of and be more grown up in those conversations, that we don't always need a randomised controlled trial of something to prove that it's an effective innovation.
No, that's a great example where actually direct patient experience is the evidence, in a sense, is the evidence that you need for a low risk, high gain intervention. So really important. So just on to my last question, so everyone get thinking for your own questions for our panel. And I'll ask Claire first. So innovative technology, as you've said, is at the heart of a reimagined NHS, as promised in the 10-year health plan for England. We've kind of started to touch on this. What would you like to see, and I'll give all the panel a chance to say something here, what would you like to see as measures of success in this process of transformational change through innovation?
Thanks, Sarah. So I was giving this some thought, and I think it goes without saying in terms of measures of success, we want to see better outcomes for patients, we want to see system improvements, and obviously within the NHS there's commitments to productivity gains. But I guess I was coming at it from a slightly different position, thinking about, I think a measure of success for me would be around, have we in the system basically created an optimal innovation ecosystem to basically support the transformation and support innovation and help it thrive. And so what I mean by that is within NHS England, there are a number of varying programs that are all there to support innovation and pull through. So right from the early stages of development all the way through to adoption and deployment. And I think there's some work going on at the moment within our team to think about, are those programs focused? Are they aligned? Have we really got, do they offer like a cohesive package of opportunities essentially to support that innovation ecosystem? And we're really starting to think about the pathways rather than the programs, and making sure that they really are sort of a cohesive package of activity and opportunity there. And I think we've talked a little bit as well about sort of system changing. So as we integrate into DHSC, again, I think there's real opportunity there for us with our DHSC colleagues to take a bit of a step back, look at all the different opportunities that are there to support that innovation ecosystem. And there is a real ambition and desire to make sure that what we've got is working the best it can, that it's really working for the system, and that ultimately we could step back in a few years' time and say we've really helped facilitate that optimal sort of innovation ecosystem that will really allow innovation to thrive and ultimately improve health and care throughout the UK. So I think for me that would be a measure of success, is have we got all the different component parts of the innovation ecosystem working in the best way that they can.
So despite the challenges, you sound sort of moderately optimistic
yes.
about that, yes? Is that a fair,
yes.
fair assessment? Yes. So Jacob, what about for you? What would be measures of success?
So I think there is probably two things on this. One is about the level of involvement of users in the innovation lifecycle. I think that would be a first one. The second one, I think you could measure so much in the innovation space, and the temptation is you try and measure too much and you don't really succeed in doing anything particularly well. So I would hone in on something that's probably the government's, probably what its main ambitions in the 10-year plan is about how it's helping people to develop more agency for themselves. That's where a lot of innovation will take place, is how we're helping people with self-management of conditions, how technology and devices are being used to support that. So I would be advocating for perhaps a new sort of national measure of something around, say, long-term condition management, with a subset of it of how innovation is supporting that improved agency and self-management. That would directly tie the innovation landscape into one of the core things government's trying to achieve through the 10-year plan. And I think that would create greater visibility for how all of innovation is supporting a more efficient and effective NHS.
And that means we have to reimagine what a health system is, actually, isn't it? It's well beyond the organisation of the provision of care through the NHS when we move into self-care, and the kind of bridge between, and innovation can be the bridge between that, particularly digital innovation. So we do need to kind of reconceptualise our approach to a healthcare system, perhaps. Brian?
So I think this, coming back to my earlier point, is there's something about kind of resources for implementation, because you remember even the simplest intervention is, a sophisticated socio-technical intervention in a very, very complex system. So sometimes, even teams who've developed something don't necessarily know why it's being successful, and how that has an impact on how they then kind of are trying to replicate that in other settings. So more time spent actually getting to the heart of how the interventions work, why it works, how it works. It seems so fundamental to me. So that's the kind of the missing kind of element, I think, in some of our kind of innovation discussions. And I think there's also something clearly about kind of making sure that when we talk about innovation, it's something that meets the needs not just of a few, but a kind of multiple kind of people, multiple kind of agencies, multiple people within the system. So making it really focusing on that seems so important. So there's a couple of things from me.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks. You'll have more questions very shortly, but not ones directly from me. So let's go out to the audience now. Do take this opportunity to quiz the panel, because I gave them questions in advance, so they had time to prepare, but now they're going to have to think on their...
Spoiling the mystique
yes.
there.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Dora. I work for the RSS service just down the street here. I'm wondering about kind of when you talk about innovations, and maybe especially kind of question for Jacob, but for the whole panel as well. How can we better involve kind of underrepresented groups? And I know we're all about inclusion and equality and diversity, but do you have any practical advice, and not just talking about ethnic minorities, but LGBTQ plus people, older people, and kind of all the intersecting identities of patients that we have? Thanks.
Do you want to go one question? So two practical things I think I'd say. I would, when having the conversation with communities who are often not involved in research or innovation, I would have to start on terms that matter to them. We often rock up with our question, which doesn't relate to their lived experience at all, or their particular problem. Let's start more with what their problems are, and that sort of open engagement. So that'll be the first thing: is can you possibly do that? Can you start in a much more open way in the conversation, and potentially start with the problems rather than the solution you want to test with them? The second thing would be to work through intermediaries. So a lot of the communities you see referenced are deeply sceptical of the NHS or of academic institutions, certainly private sector organisations, a lot of whom work in this space. So, but actually, the more you can do to work through intermediaries, so voluntary sector organisations, community groups, and the umbrella groups that can help you find them, National Voices being one, but we're not the only umbrella group out there, that can make a real difference, because it bridges that trust deficit that you might have with communities. And so if you can get the intermediaries to understand why the innovation matters, that's half the battle won, because then they'll kind of speed up the process for you. So they would be my two practical tips.
Okay, so that really speaks to involvement, doesn't it? I mean, innovation matters because the problems come from the ground. The problems for which we are seeking solutions come from the ground up. Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for the panel discussion. So my name's Nick Fahia from RAND Europe, and I was thinking about the whole process of implementation as this a process of learning and change by individual professionals. But for the workforce, we quite often hear quite a sense of frustration in terms of a lack of time and support for change and a slightly fragmented process of individual experience. And we hear that, for example, I'm thinking of a project we're working on at the moment by antibiotic testing, where the doctor who requests the test of the pathogen is not going to be the doctor who sees the patient when the test comes back, and so their incentive to implement change is hard to articulate. How can we address that? What are your suggestions for how you can build that support for change across that slightly fragmented working process?
So Brian, do you want to have a go first?
Yeah, no, I mean, and the interesting thing is, I think that there is so much variation within the health service, isn't there? And I think so. It comes back to a kind of a sense of priorities and culture within organisations. You know, I mean, in the Northeast, for example, we have some of the most successful improvement-driven provider organisations in the country who have got an exceptional track record for doing this kind of work because the kind of message is set from the top of the organisations about the importance and value of doing this, and there's modelling that takes place from those leaders around this. And I think that kind of creates the domino effect within organisations, and that seems absolutely critical, because the reality is, if people have to do this in the margins, if people do it in their breaks, if they do it after work, then it becomes devalued in the eyes of the service, and that becomes the priority gets lost. So it absolutely has to come from the top, and there also has to be something about constancy of purpose. So there's always the thing, you know, there's a new innovation, a new program, and people think, well, is it going to last? Will we still be talking about this in a year's time? So the most successful organisations out there are saying, well, look, we're in it for the long term. This is not just a 1 or 2 year thing. This is something that's embedded. It's part of the DNA of this organisation, and it's going to still be here in 4 or 5 years' time. So giving that assurance about this, and actually making sure that everyone in the organisation, I talked earlier about management, but that is so important to management because they're the people who give people the space and time and don't say, well, don't think about this. What about the kind of core responsibilities in your day job? So if you get that connection between leadership, management, and the front line, I think you're in a very strong place to do this. But it really has to come from the top. All the evidence seems to say that in this country.
Claire, anything you want to add to that question?
No, support everything that's been said before by colleagues. It's really challenging, and I think all of us would want to be in a better position in terms of resource, but I guess we are where we are. I think that it's something we think about a lot in NHS England, and I guess at a more local level, one of the things we do is obviously fund the Health Innovation Network. So they're a partnership between NHS England and Office for Life Sciences, and there's a number of them across England, and they really are there much more on the ground and close to the action to support that adoption and spread of innovation. So hopefully by having that sort of supporting infrastructure in place at the local level as well will really help to sort of drive through some of those changes, noting that resources is challenging and we don't want to overburden already overstretched staff working in the NHS. So I guess it's from the centre's point of view, it's about making sure that we've got as much infrastructure in place and support in place to help smooth that pathway through to adoption.
Sounds like lots of opportunities to also learn from what's working well in some regions as well. So another question, thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for a very interesting conversation. Farnas Nikpur, Inclusionaries Lab for Inclusive Design and Human-Centered Innovation, University of Liverpool. I have two questions, depending on how much time we've got left, which are mainly around matters of disentanglement and granularity. One of them is around PPIE, so I will start with Jacob. And the other one is really about what I would call orders of systems change, because we keep talking about systems change, but we keep perhaps combining orders of systems optimization, the systems innovation, and systems transformation. And we know that these are three very distinct orders of change, each of which requires different methods, different mindsets, different levers of change. And I think that this kind of lack of granularity, perhaps, I mean, I'm just very interested to hear from the panel what are their views on that. And going back to the point of PPIE, I think some of us might be aware there is a, in my view, a very strong element of tokenism and tick boxing with PPIE going on. At the same time, we have got many people in the room so far asking for more granular and detailed information, especially in matters of product design, or let's say user-centered design, simply, or whatever colleagues would like to call it, co-design, patient-centered design. They are asking for more details about how could you actually work with patients. From a design point of view, we really kind of separate these patient and public as stakeholders and end users. And my question is, do you see, because you're representing really strongly the voice of both groups, do you think there is any value in perhaps disentangling patient and public involvement and engagement, because they might serve very different purposes and they require different methods of working? I'll stop here. Thank you.
No, thanks very much. Great question. I kind of want to answer it, but Jacob, you can answer it.
On the tokenism point, absolutely. I still see that every single day. I've been working in this space for 15 years, and I still get a phone call saying, can you get me a patient to a focus group on Tuesday? I'm like, nope, that's not how we do this. It's like, so there's a lot of tokenism going on. I think partly branding it PPIE is sort of the problem. We sort of have a PPI lead in an organisation or a PPIE partner, and actually it's much more about a culture. And I do agree with you that you have to be specific about, do we want to engage a group of patients here, or are we engaging a group of members of the public? And what do we mean by public? Is it particular community groups we're talking about? We should have a better culture about this, and then be specific about who we need to engage and at what point in the cycle we need to engage them, and what their opportunity for influencing the process might be. Because sometimes it's like, tell us all of your problems and we'll try and fix them. It's a very open-ended thing. Other times it's, we've got this very specific thing we'd like to test with you. What do you think? So being honest about where we are in the cycle. So I think all of those things wrapped together change that dynamic around PPIE, or whatever you want to call it. And not relying on one methodology is probably another route. So often it will be, we've got a project, we've got a PPIE rep who's supposed to talk for all people with that condition, or all people from that community, and they can't. So actually, what can you do in terms of the mixing quant and qual methodologies, so you have a much more rounded view of how a community might respond to an innovation? So all those things wrapped together are how we move that forward. I don't know if that's at all helpful, but that's certainly what I try and do day in, day out with my life. So.
Thank you. I can't stop myself, so I'm going to answer a little bit as well. Actually, obviously support what Jacob has said, but I think sometimes we want to separate public and patient, and sometimes we don't, because we're all patients and we're all part of the public. So I think that your point about granularity is really key here. Is actually being quite clear as to what we're engaging, who we're engaging, and what for, and therefore engaging the right people for the right thing. With a move towards predictive medicine, then we're all future patients, and so you would want to engage more widely. If you're focusing on a very specific condition in advanced stage, you would want to speak with people that are in that position. So I think it's really being clear about the kind of objectives, and so I think your point's really important, and incumbent on us to do that. So I think we've got time for one more question, if there's another one. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, hello. I'm Wietse Bruisma from the Dutch Healthcare Institute. I have a question about technology push versus technology pull. It seems that you're all advocating for a technology pull, first identifying the problem and then finding a suitable solution. But of course, in practice, we have to deal with all kinds of technology push. How do you propose that we deal with that to get rid of sort of the technologies that are solutions to, well, let's say, theoretical problems?
Claire, do you want to have a first stab?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Interesting question. So a number of things. So we have programs within NHS England, so our clinical entrepreneur programs, for example, take technologies and promising sort of startups and individuals and then match those with where they can basically be applied within the system. So that's sort of the push rather than the pull. I guess an area where we're starting to see the sort of switch from sort of push to pull come into a bit more fruition is around quantum. So I don't profess to be an expert on quantum, but it's a fast-moving area that potentially offers huge opportunities to for transformation and care outcomes across the system. So where we talked previously about sort of being needs-led and system-driven, this is slightly turning that around, in as much as we've got a potential solution in quantum methodologies that could be applied within healthcare settings. So how do we find the best applications where quantum can really start to deliver sort of a notable change in particular sort of areas of activity. So that's sort of pushing us to think a little bit differently about how we approach this, and we're working with colleagues at Q Biomed in London to start to bring together the quantum community and the clinical community to see where there really are those opportunities to maximise the use of that really promising technology to solve really some of the sort of intractable problems within the healthcare setting at the moment, focusing to start with on sort of point-of-care testing, lateral flow tests, where quantum offers much faster, much more specific ways of diagnosing particular conditions within healthcare settings. So I think a slightly different approach to us, where we've got the technology and we're applying it to the system versus our normal approach, which was where's the need in the system and where's the solutions. So.
Okay, thank you. Jacob, do you want to?
Yeah, just quickly on push. I sort of thought about this from a user perspective, and I'm remembering a workshop I was at right at the start of my journey on doing patient and public involvement about 15 years ago, and there was a doctor in this focus group who said, "Can we just turn Google off, please? Because I don't like patients doing their research on Google and bringing it to consultations." And you see that sort of, we're like, no, you can't turn Google off. That is the technology that's being pushed onto the system by patients using it. I think the same is true probably AI and lots of other solutions. So actually, who's pushing the solutions into the system? If it's a patient or a member of the public using a technology or innovation, they're turning up with something, we can't say no, don't do that, or that's bad, or that's naughty, or stop, because that's just ignoring the reality. We need to think about how we help patients use those technologies safely and make sure that we're building ways into the system of using them effectively. So it's like, how do we manage the push from a user point of view? It's not just going to be industry that pushes it, it will be users, and just telling them no won't work.
And Brian, anything to add?
I mean, I think there's something about, if you look at kind of the system itself, about the quantum of change. And I think if you talk to kind of provider organisations, they will talk about the kind of level of expectations, the level of kind of push-pull challenges within the organisation, nationally, locally, and something about kind of honing that down to something what's manageable. And I think manageability at the moment around change is one of the most important things, because if we want to keep people kind of engaged, involved, enthused by this debate, then we have to think about manageability, and that kind of speaks to, I think, the whole broader kind of pull-push challenge.
Thanks very much. I think you've kind of set out the challenges, and they're actually for all of us, aren't they? So I think we all have to kind of take on board the comments and insights from the panel as we go about our work, and kind of influence things to move forward positively. So thank you everyone for your questions. It's time to wrap up now, but I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to explore these issues in the breaks and throughout the conference. And obviously we can't know the future, but you've definitely heard there's ways in which we can really shape it despite all the challenges. So please join me in thanking the panel for their insights, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you again to the panel members. That was an excellent discussion, and like you said, we didn't quite get a chance to answer all the questions, but an excellent opportunity in the next break for anyone who wants to continue that conversation. We're now going to move on to our lightning talk series. Just give people a chance to go to the next workshop, if that's where people are heading. Okay, okay. Okay, if everyone's ready, we will move on to the lightning talks. The theme of these lightning talks is insight to implementation, bridging a gap between horizon scanning, foresight, future thinking, and real-world adaptation of technology and innovation. Can I just remind the speakers to keep these lightning if you can just immediately get on stage after the previous speaker has finished. Have we got our first speaker for the lightning talk? Technical difficulties? Fantastic, if you come.
Hello everyone, I am Anna Kononiuk and I would like to welcome all of you with Polish Dzień dobry, which is very difficult to pronounce, which stands for English good evening, good morning and good afternoon. And today I'd like to present very briefly the project that we run at Białystok University of Technology, which is located in Poland, together with Future Industry Platform. So the title of the project was the Implementation of Social and Technological Innovations of the Industry of the Future, dedicated to supporting the employment of people with disabilities in Polish manufacturing enterprises. So the project was founded by State Fund for Rehabilitation of Disabled Persons, and we started 2 years ago, and this year we have just finished our works. So the main research method, it was Delphi method, but it was preceded also by critical literature review, thanks to which we identify technological and social solutions that could help people with disabilities at the workplace. And also we carried out a panel to which we invited also disabled people to ask them about the possible innovation that would help them at the workplace. So the context that we set this project within is the Industry 4.0. If you think about the Polish manufacturing sector, we cannot say that we are mature in this respect. Nevertheless, the main values that are visible in the context of the industry, that's human-machine collaboration, product personalization, sustainable development, flexibility and resilience, and also humanization of work. So all of these values align strongly with the idea that we believe that inclusion of people with disabilities in professional life is one of the key aspects of ensuring them a dignified life. So in total we elaborated 17 phases. 8 of them were of social origin, and out of these, 3, according to the experts that come from Polish manufacturing enterprises. So you can see that this research sample was quite extensive because we asked 383 Polish manufacturing enterprises. So we've got like production managers, HR managers, innovation specialists, top-level managers, and process engineers. And if you look at the radar, so the radar illustrates how the assessments became more aligned in the second round, confirming strong expert consensus, and 3 theses that experts were really unanimous in their opinion about. That was thesis number 3, regular training sessions on the needs and functioning of people with disabilities would help them to promote openness and sensitivity among managers and employees of smart factories. Then the implementation of solutions providing psychological and social support for employees with disabilities will ensure greater effectiveness in task performance. And thesis number 8, that the introduction of social mentoring programs connecting experienced employees with disabilities and newly hired workers will support them in the process of adaptation and career development. We also investigated other innovations such as virtual reality tools that would enable management staff and coworkers to understand the perspective of a person with disability, the placement of collaborative robot at the workplace, also the use of gamification elements, and the placement and the use of interactive boards that allow monitoring of employees' mood and physical condition. And this thesis was regarded by our respondents as the least important. So just to conclude, experts consider social innovations, especially training programs, inclusive recruitment processes, and tools that foster empathy as key to cultural transformation of enterprises. Openness and sensitivity is really important, so promoting them among managers and employees of smart factories is seen as particularly important. Our experts also stressed uncertainty in implementation. Although the potential of social innovation is recognized, experts point out the difficulties in their implementation as far as short-term implementation is concerned. If you think about long-term perspectives of social innovation, such as regular training sessions or adjustments or recruitment processes, require substantial investment and systemic changes. And the effectiveness may only become evident in the medium or long term, especially in the context of implementing Industry 5.0 strategies. And also our analysis identifies clear innovation drivers, so that's management's orientation towards inclusion and diversity in the workplace, financial programs, tax incentives, dedicated technological support, and also our research addressed like the most prevalent barriers such as stereotypes, long training and preparation, infrastructure limitation, and high training costs. And I would like to end up with a very short but yet powerful takeaway message that innovation thrives where technology meets empathy. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Julie England and I am a public health practitioner of research and evaluation with Durham County Council, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about public involvement in evaluations. It was really interesting to listen to the last speakers, so I very much resonate with what those speakers said. And although this might seem kind of obvious, it's really important to think of a few reasons that we might want to involve the public in evaluations. And I know one of our speakers was talking about tokenism, and that really hits home to me as well, because that's certainly something we want to avoid. But a lot of our involvement is around trust with our community members. So it's just making sure that we get to know each other, we really understand where we're all coming from, and that we understand the local history and the local geography of an area, especially even the physical geography. I think in the evaluation I'm involved in, I think I've been on numerous tours in the community I've been working in, and I feel like I'm a quasi-expert, an honorary tour guide in that area. The second reason is around community engagement, and that is, again, an obvious thing, but I think there's this concept of working with people and not doing things to people, and this gets to the issue of avoiding tokenism. And then the issue of cultural insights, and I think that's so important, because each area, we all come from an area, it has its own culture, its own history, and I think it's working on evaluation with members of the public is just understanding that culture that the folks are in, their values, their perceptions, how they communicate with each other and with the wider community. So this is the evaluation I've been working on. A couple of my lovely colleagues from the University of Edinburgh are with me today, and it's a first Elevate evaluation. And I won't bore you with those more about the evaluation itself, but those were the three evaluation work packages that we're looking at. And I think one thing I wanted to mention, we have brought together a public involvement group to help us with this research, and they aren't involved in the data collection, but they are really the intelligence to help us understand what we should be thinking about when we're involving members of the public in this. And I think the difference that PPIE has made and that group has made, they've been integral really to our work on this evaluation. I think you can't force people to care about evaluation or what the results of an evaluation are. But I think having a group like the Public Involvement Group has increased our chances of helping people in the community to care. And I should say, in case people don't know, Horden, if anybody knows County Durham, Horden's a small village in East Durham, right on the coast, a former mining village. Secondly, our residents have actually really helped us capture the context around community values. What do people value? Even around the politics that are quite a big thing at the minute. And then number 3, I've put understanding where group members are coming from. And you know, when you get together with people, you want to know where people are coming from, what their mindset is. And I think it's been really useful for me working with that group to find out where are people coming from, how long have they lived in Horden, their length of time in the community, why do they even want to be a member of the Public Involvement Group, and that's really key. And I think, you know, there are lots of lessons. I think whenever we're involved in this kind of a group, you always learn lessons. I tell my colleagues all the time, I've won the lottery in working with them and working in Horden, because it's a very special place. If you ever have a chance to visit East Durham, it's a very special place. But I think what I've learned is around clear communication, and I think one of our colleagues was talking about that, just making sure that any kind of public involvement, that we all know why we're there, what we're looking at, what we're studying. And then the issue, I know it's an overused word, but empowerment, that residents, they know what works. They know what works in their area and why it works, how it works, and maybe what doesn't work. And then engagement strategies. Again, resonating with our colleagues here, talking about it's not a one-size-fits-all, I think, with public involvement in evaluation. You know, some people might want to write an article about the evaluation to communicate to their colleagues. Some might want to help with a website. Some might not have those skills or might not want to be involved, so it's offering tailored options for them. And then not everybody wants to meet in a big group, but they might want to be involved, so it's potentially offering one-to-one meetings with them or email or whatever works for them. And then certainly hosting the usual lunch and learn, but I think even at the minute we're looking at creative ways to involve our public involvement group through art, through other lunch and learn type of activities, creative workshops. We have a lovely gal called Pippa, who's an amazing artist, and she's going to work with us to help share our findings. So that's where we are at the moment. And I think the key really with this kind of approach is that you just have a better, more context-rich evaluation, and it really enables the community to share findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So my name is Haoyuguo or Alice. I'm from the University of Edinburgh. I'm really glad to be here talking to you all about our ongoing project, which has 2 focuses. First of all, we're focused on understanding the inequalities in adopting digital health services in rural Scotland, and also seeking solutions that people have used within the community so that we can identify their strengths, understand what they're doing, and hopefully use these resources more widely. So what we've done so far is that we've had interviews through charities in rural Scotland, working with people who need regular health care, for example, for chronic conditions, those from the Gypsy traveller communities, carers, people with mental health conditions, and people with disabilities, so quite a diverse group. And to share some preliminary results with you, I think it makes more sense if I go to the second point first, since I've done a little bit more analysis since I made the slides. So connectivity is still very much an issue in rural Scotland, and this is not just not having stable broadband, not having Wi-Fi, but also sometimes the phone signal cuts out, and people have had to be very creative and flexible with the way they work with the internet and with phone calls. So oftentimes they go to things like grocery stores, coffee shops, local libraries as an access point. And also sometimes a little bit counterintuitively using Wi-Fi to assist telephone calling. But that's not the only problem. There are, of course, technical difficulties, and this is especially important when they're in need of help, when they're feeling mental or physical pain and they really need healthcare attention. So to tackle difficulties with technical skills, upskilling is, of course, important, but there is a time and place for it. That's when people have the luxury, the time and mentality to do it. And when they are struggling with a headache and trying to get the app to work, that's not the time for teaching them the skill, but providing them the support. Which brings me to the next few points. So there's often a lack of awareness of what's happening, what's changing, what's expected of them, and how the service works. And also, people are often hit by this lack of multimodality or lack of options of flexibility, often sometimes being told, oh, you have to book your appointment on our website, you have to call us, you cannot walk into the surgery. And this is where it's really important to, first of all, before they need to access the service, to consider communicating the changes more clearly and offer instructions, but also, very importantly, to think about how we can make the service more flexible, how we can offer support to those in need of help. And I hear so many stories where the most important thing for them is to have that one person who's willing to go the extra mile, to not stick to the script, and to make that reasonable adjustment that's so much needed when they're desperately in need of help. So I'd like to reflect on the backdrop of when NHS digitalization is happening. A lot of these changes happened during COVID. It was a chaotic time. We were talking about protect the NHS to help save the system. Granted, it's still very much under strain and needs sustainable solutions, but I would like to invite everyone in the room to reflect on what these changes mean for patients who need care, and especially for those who are less privileged. And I'd like to echo points from previous speakers that empathy isn't just important to innovation, but also fundamental to healthcare. And lastly, I'd like to just conclude on our next steps. So we will do more community engagement workshops with local members and also stakeholders. We will use systems approaches, so like drawings, rich pictures, to think about the solutions they have used, how these can be scaled up and transferred to other settings and hopefully help other rural communities or other communities that are struggling with digital healthcare.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Ballard. I'm a health psychologist and a senior research fellow at the University of Southampton. I'm going to talk to you about this workshop that we conducted in February in the Netherlands, and I'm going to tell you specifically about how we involved patient and public voice in this workshop. We really wanted to achieve some meaningful PPI, and we did extensive deliberation, and we were weighing up this. I think a couple of people have mentioned this kind of tokenistic version of PPI, and I was always quite sceptical of the kind of, you go see this expert PPI group that the hospital has set up, and then you go off with your project, but then balancing that with this burden and this complex topic of and our topic was inclusive medical AI. So I'll just tell you a bit about the workshop, and then I'll tell you a bit about how we conducted the PPI element. So it's a 5-day workshop. It was a transdisciplinary workshop. There was 37 experts. They came from very diverse backgrounds across Europe, so healthcare, ethics, law, social sciences, AI, and people that had experience in patient advocacy. We used design thinking and a participatory method to develop the framework to run the workshop. And we identified 3 key challenges that we worked for the whole 5 days on, which are these, which I'm not going to speak through, but I'm going to tell you how we came up with those challenges on the next slide. So these are all the elements to our PPI. Running across the whole thing was this ELSA Northern Netherlands. So ELSA is Ethical, Legal and Psychosocial Aspects, Northern Netherlands Network. And they have this Citizen and Patient Advisory Board, and they were consulted at multiple points during the whole process of developing the workshop, but also how do we ensure we have meaningful patient and public voice. The first thing we did after consulting with the advisory board was we convened a workshop in the UK, and that was this kind of traditional patient and public expert group. But what we posed, the question we posed to them was, how do we meaningfully involve patient and public voices in our workshop? But we also asked them about their thoughts around inclusivity in medical AI, which we then, it helped inform us to develop the workshop. This is the tool we use to come up with these 3 challenges. So it's a tool called Polis. It's a consensus building tool. In my experience with working with complex topics in healthcare, you often get quite polarised views. So we wanted to use a tool that helped us build consensus around what patients and public thought were the biggest challenges in inclusivity, but also what the academic and industry experts also thought as well. So we used the Polis twice, one with patient and public and one with the other workshop attendees, and we developed this consensus to make sure that the 3 challenges we were working on were the most important for all these groups. During the workshop, this is something that we deliberated extensively on, was how do we involve patient and public meaningfully, but not in a burdensome way, in the workshop. To invite them for the whole 5 days was incredibly burdensome. For me being there as an academic, it was burdensome. So we settled upon inviting expert patients for one of the days. It was the second day, and they worked with all of the other workshop attendees to come up with patient personas and patient journeys. So every other piece of work we did during the workshop in the coming days were kind of hung on these personas and journeys. And the expert patients, they came from quite diverse backgrounds, so from low socioeconomic status, people with disabilities, with neurodivergence. And then we've carried on working with these expert patients and with our panel. And so we did an evaluation with the expert patients. It was new to us to involve people in this way in our work. And the evaluation was quite positive. And I think another speaker spoke about these other elements that come out of doing this kind of work with expert patients. So not only did they get paid for their time, but they reported that their confidence had built, they'd learnt new things, and they were slightly sceptical about working with such a large group of academics, and they actually enjoyed it. I'm just going to put all these up so you can see that QR code. So the QR code is a link to our preprint. So the preprint is the framework. So the framework that we've developed because of this workshop, which helps realise inclusivity in medical AI. Yeah, there's a preprint. At the moment, our conclusions are that we believe that all of the work we did demonstrates a good model for incorporating meaningful PPI in discussions in this topic, and we can't see any reason why that couldn't be transposed to other complex topics. Oh gosh, I've run out of time. There we go.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, our thanks to the Conference Committee for the invitation to present today. I'm Shmaila Anwar from the NIHR Research Delivery Network, and I'm joined here by my colleague.
Yes, hi, I'm Ross Fairbairn. I'm a research associate at the Innovation Observatory.
Great. So we've got 5 minutes today and around 7 slides, so we'll keep this focused to share how the Innovation Observatory and the Research Delivery Network are collaborating to build a horizon scanning approach that will help the NIHR anticipate future research delivery needs and staying ahead of demand. Okay, and so why does this matter? The UK government's life sciences vision positions the UK as the go-to destination to conduct cutting-edge research. Efficient delivery depends on having the right capacity, the right sites and the right partnerships in place ahead of time. Horizon scanning gives us a structured way to connect past activity with future demand so we can plan earlier, respond faster and make sure the system is ready when new studies arrive. To do this well, we needed to bring 2 types of intelligence together. So from the RDN, we had real-world delivery insights, how studies were recruiting, i.e. how they were performing, from which sites, regions, specialties, etc., and consequently where activity and pressure points were. From the Innovation Observatory, we have structured horizon scanning data, what's entering the global pipeline, which technologies and disease areas are accelerating, and early signals on future demand. And when we combine those 2 views, we get a much clearer picture of what's coming next and what we need to be ready for. I'll hand over now to Ross to talk through how we've brought these data sets together to enable this.
Thanks, Shimala. So we had a challenge in this project, and the challenge was that our medicines horizon scanning data sets were speaking different languages. So we often collect data on health conditions, and then we try to classify that at a higher level. The RDN does this by working with specialties, whereas the IO uses therapeutic areas. And so to really gain some useful insights, we want to try and align these 2 areas. And so we did this with a brief data mapping exercise. And so we're looking to map one-to-one RDN specialties to IO therapeutic areas. In some cases, this is really nice and straightforward. So respiratory as a specialty to respiratory system, nice and easy. Some of them are a little more challenging, so anesthesia, perioperative medicine, and pain management to pain relief is okay, it's probably good enough for us and we can move on. And then finally, there are some really challenging ones, so dementia and neurodegeneration as a specialty just doesn't really have a good match in our IO therapeutic areas because it's just at too low of a level. And so we created a system that allowed us to do this mapping. We mapped 9,379 Innovation Observatory technology records to at least 1 specialty for the RDN. We did this with a brief bit of Python code to just make this a bit easier for us. We started by mapping one-to-one with therapeutic areas, If we had no match there, then we go down to the health conditions. So for dementia and neurodegeneration, that's where we can start to map those. And then finally, if there's no match at all, we can just do a bit of manual work ourselves. And so this allows us to create a really rich data set, which we can then share with the RDN, and they can come up with some really nice insights, which Shimala will now talk you through.
So very briefly. Okay. So in the red graph, you can see the cancer subspecialties where the RDN is currently delivering with strong activity in haematology, lung, and the breast cancer portfolios. In the blue graph there, you can see what's coming, and that the landscape is dominated again with hematological cancers, followed by GI, lung, and breast, broadly aligned with the RDN portfolio, but on a much larger scale. In addition, 46% of the cancer pipeline from the Innovation Observatory data is in rare diseases, and almost half of the innovations are new technologies, including 34% new medicinal products, with immunotherapies being a significant class of drugs coming through. It also tells us key kind of companies that are potentially operating in this space. So what does this show? This shows us that we need to strengthen delivery capacity, particularly in haematology, lung, and GI, and ensure sites are equipped for increasingly complex studies. With immunotherapies forming a major share of the pipeline, we also need sites with governance, infusion capabilities, and safety expertise to deliver these treatments consistently nationwide. So very briefly then, what does this all actually mean for the RDN? It gives us a clear visibility of where demand is building, which specialties and subspecialties, technologies and disease areas may need strengthening, lets us engage proactively with high-value sponsors rather than waiting for studies to land. It also exposes key challenges. Our current capacity doesn't always match the future pipeline. Site readiness and site readiness is variable, and data gaps are present. So often we have issues with precise forecasting. So the next step is to make this a consistent joint Innovation Observatory RDN horizon scanning process across the whole portfolio, putting the system in a position to respond rather than react, and ensuring the UK is ready for research that is coming. Thank you.
Also means it's your last one. You'll be pleased to hear. Okay, so I am Jenny Lister. I'm from the University of York, and I'm going to really, very quickly, talk you through a review that I'm working on at the moment, looking at methods for inclusive health and care research, and we're hoping that that review will then guide some future horizon scanning in this area. So the work itself is part of a wider work package where we're looking at how we can maybe use horizon scanning to explore the health and social care research methods landscape. This work's going on within the NIHR Research Support Service. And it's about kind of trying to gather that intelligence about novelty and innovation in research methods in this area so that we can help our advisors better advise researchers who are coming to us and kind of stay ahead of the game around kind of health and social care research methods. And within this work package, we've got a theme of research inclusion. And we kind of feel that horizon scanning holds real potential for identifying innovation in inclusive research methods, but we didn't really know where to start because this hasn't really been done before. So we've kind of decided to go sort of lay the groundwork, map the current landscape, what's being done at the moment, and use those findings to guide our future horizon scanning, hopefully. So the review itself, so we're mapping this landscape through a scoping review. The main question of this review is when researchers are saying they're doing inclusive research, what are the methods that they're using? And the main inclusion criteria that we're kind of using to find this research is that the authors are saying in the title or abstract of their papers that they're including one or more groups that they're describing as underrepresented or underserved or other synonyms around that area in relation to the research area or health and care outcome. This is a work in progress, so all the screening is done and data extraction is ongoing. Another thing that we are doing is with the excluded studies, there's some areas of interest where we're kind of tagging those and putting those to one side as kind of secondary findings that might sort of again help us with our kind of to direct our horizon scanning in the future. And also sort of kind of support the wider NIHR and research support service. So last slide. So how do we think our findings might be able to inform horizon scanning? Obviously this is ongoing, other things will come up as we go. But for example, I'm expecting that we might identify some new and innovative methods coming out in the research. And perhaps we can kind of then look back at how those methods have come into the research, where they've come from, and that might help us understand where to look in the future to identify those things in better time before they get to that stage. The next 2 points were quite similar, I realised, after I'd put these slides together. But basically it's about kind of identifying gaps, potentially in kind of research areas, types of research or demographic groups that might be receiving more or less focus in these studies. So very hypothetically, you know, if there's a lot going on research inclusion in trials or qual, but not a lot in other areas, maybe we can then start guiding our future horizon scanning towards filling those gaps and finding ways to improve inclusion in those areas. And similarly with some demographic groups that might be receiving less focus. And then another thing we've kind of pulling out is where researchers are describing limitations of the methods that they're using and their current approaches. And maybe we can again kind of do some work to identify innovation in other areas that we might be able to use to plug those gaps. So it is a work in progress. We have a, oh, that's tiny, isn't it? But there is a protocol, an open science framework, and that's my email address if anyone wants to get in touch with any questions or comments. But have I kept time as well? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all our speakers, and thank you for keeping to 5 minutes. That was very impressive to unpack all those methods. So we're now going to move to the final break, and if people could be back here for 16:20 for the closing remarks, that'd be excellent. Thank you. Hello everyone, I think we're about ready to start, if people could take a seat. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce our final speaker of today, the keynote by Sarah Cunningham-Burley. Thank you very much.
So thanks very much. So thank you, Dawn, and of course all your team for inviting me to deliver this keynote. It's great to be here. I've really enjoyed the afternoon, and excellent to have this opportunity to explore with you all how, by putting ethics first, we can create equitable and inclusive health futures. So, as you know, I'm Sarah Cunningham-Burley, and I have the great privilege of chairing the Nuffield Council on Bioethics. I have another job as well, and that's at the University of Edinburgh, where I'm Professor of Medical and Family Sociology, and nice to see some of my Edinburgh colleagues here as well. So, in case you don't know, the NCOB is the UK's leading voice of bioethics, and as I've said, it's a real privilege to chair it. It's close to 35 years old now, so I have the weight of that legacy on my shoulders. And over that time, we've identified and tackled some of the most complex and controversial issues facing societies across the globe. And I hope that we have brought clarity to that complexity and mapped practical ways through what are seemingly intractable dilemmas. And we've heard about some of those intractable dilemmas already today. And our work has shifted public understanding, engaged academic communities, and led to some lasting policy change in the UK and internationally, and across diverse areas, ranging from public health to assisted reproduction and genome editing. But as we've already heard, the world is changing, and how we work today must respond to those changes, and everyone in the room is doing that in their own way. We're living through one of the most disruptive technological periods in history. Breakthroughs that we've heard about, like AI, biotechnology. Whoops, I've just switched this off by mistake. Hold on. Whoop, but I can get it back. Hang on. Don't know how I did that. And quantum can offer transformative potential to tackle some of society's greatest challenges. But governance, and perhaps society as a whole, is not keeping up. The absence of robust safeguards risks inequitable innovation and an erosion of public trust in research. And with deregulatory sentiment gaining momentum, we could soon see a world where economic potential is prioritised over public want, values, and acceptance. So having the ability to get ahead of these issues before they emerge has become more important than ever before. And so conferences like this are more important than ever before. So this is why the Nuffield Council on Bioethics, NCOB, has committed to enhancing its ability to anticipate in a rigorous and informed way, and to bring ethics into the frame of such futures work, making ethics matter. As a bioethics council, we are committed to ensuring that for whatever is coming, there is a better understanding of its associated ethical implications, including inevitable trade-offs, and for this to occur at an early stage in the innovation trajectory.
So to be clear, anticipation through horizon scanning is not new. It's not new for any of us, and including us at NCOB. We've done it since our inception. It's helped us guide our topic selections to what we're going to work on, shape our research projects, as it does for so many others, whether in industry, healthcare, or research. And since 2019, we have published our horizon scans, sharing the insights we have gathered so that they can be useful to our audiences and communities. And I think I should be on the next slide. And indeed, we hear that these have been useful across diverse communities, not least because we're the only organisation with a specific bioethics horizon scanning function. In early 2024, we launched a new strategy which, partly in response to the situation I've outlined, that is rapid developments, their transformative potential, requires us all to engage in social and ethical matters. This has meant that we're evolving our horizon scanning programme and pushing it to become more encompassing of foresight and future methods and embedding ethics therein. This is all with an aim of strengthening our ability to identify what is coming, what questions need to be asked of it and by whom, and what this means for society, inclusion, and governance. How are we developing our horizon scanning? First, we've introduced a timed-framed format. So that's the purple one on the slide. And we published this in 2024. By assessing our scan topics for their political context, regulatory concern, funding landscape, and level of public interest, we felt able to indicate how quickly they could raise ethical implications in the UK and what these might be. So this additional layer of analysis against more traditional time framing around the innovation to translation cycle has been welcomed by those who use our scan insights. So that's one way in which we're developing our horizon scanning to embed ethics. We also sometimes focus on something more specific and in-depth, and earlier this year we launched a large-scale ethical review of the 14-day rule for human embryos. As science is developing further, this guardrail may need revisiting. That's an open question. So this type of review is not new for NCOB, but it's the first piece of research we have done where we have woven a futures methodology, namely morphological scenario development, into a project. So using this method has enabled us to work with a diverse group of experts to generate provocative future scenarios of what the world could look like if the 14-day rule were to change or to remain the same. This insight has strengthened our understanding of the possibilities and is now being used to create stimulus materials for the public engagement phase of the project, which will start very soon. So those two examples, novel time-framed horizon scanning and then the in-depth futures work around the 14-day rule, are two examples of how serious we are about our commitment and using the methodologies that people in this room are developing and learning with you. But we're definitely keen to go further. Currently, our horizon scanning is primarily led by UK insight and framing. However, bioethics is global by its nature, but not universal, as is techno-scientific innovation. And this means we must be cognizant of global drivers, systems, and values if we are ever going to successfully embed ethics into policy, even at a national level. So we cannot ignore the global framing. This is why we've embarked on an academic partnership with the International Society for Stem Cell Research to explore whether it is possible to timeframe a horizon scan in this area that seeks to map emerging ethical implications in this field, but do this on a global scale. We'll share our learnings from this project next year, assessing the feasibility of global horizon scanning and whether these exercises could be woven into our future work. But a question that has emerged for me through our evolutionary efforts and the efforts of the excellent horizon scanning team at Nuffield Council on Bioethics is, have we transformed its purpose and role, and in a positive way? And by this, I'm speaking to the fact that while most horizon scans seek to map a journey of technological progress and leave it there, we attempt to present the progress of innovation through an ethical lens, sometimes even leading to questioning that progress narrative in the first place. We want people to understand, first and foremost, that there will always be social, political, and ethical issues to consider when I've done it again, sorry. I must be holding the side of the thing. I need to go back to paper. Sorry about that. So we want people to understand first and foremost that there will always be social, political, and ethical issues to consider when reaching to technology to solve societal challenges. But we want them to be better equipped to know when the ethical tipping points of innovation are coming and how we might respond to them. It is our hope that in doing this, and by providing the information we have in this way, decision makers will be better informed and better supported to develop policies that have ethical exploration at their centre. This is how we can best assure innovation is fair and equitable. Now, another question that has emerged through our anticipatory expansion is whether we could do more to bring the publics into our work at an early stage, while firmly arguing the normative we should be doing this. So working to surface, explore, and better understand publics' views and opinions on innovation is part of what we do. Indeed, ethical exploration and public participation go hand in glove. And there are examples whereby working in this way, we have been able to ensure decision makers can proportionately regulate research and design policies that sensitively encompass our social values, and that these can promote trust and make research and innovation processes themselves trustworthy. And I'll look to a couple of examples. So looking to the Genetic Technology Precision Breeding Act of 2023, hence the picture of the animals, it was informed by an ethical review and public dialogue undertaken at NCOB. We utilised ethical analysis to identify and explore the priority issues of public interest regarding this technology. And what we found was that the public were most concerned about how the technology would be used, for what purpose, and in whose interest, rather than anything around the nature of the technology itself, the gene editing. So this insight led to the resultant act containing a provision for scrutiny by a welfare advisory body and a requirement for breeders to submit a declaration that the health of the animal or welfare of the animal will not be harmed by its precision breeding traits. These two inclusions reflect societal values and help ensure the use of the technology can garner public trust and be used in a socially and ethically acceptable way. Another place to look to for ethical foresight is the work that we undertook to understand the future of ageing and how innovation can support older adults to live well in later life, a key challenge, and for healthcare systems and society as a whole. So this was a large piece of public deliberation that focused on three broad areas: research into biological aging, assistive monitoring and communications technologies, for example, health apps, and data-driven detection or diagnosis of age-related conditions. All three of these are assumed to have the potential to support people to flourish in older age, but they could also raise significant ethical questions about how aging is perceived or how older adults are valued in our society. By working with the public directly, we were able to surface some of these issues. This people-centered insight, along with our ethical analysis, so hand in glove, enabled us to propose an ethical framework to help everyone involved in conducting research relating to ageing think through the ethical implications of their work. Those participating in our dialogues were thinking well beyond technological solutions too. So this inclusive approach meant that we could articulate clear recommendations, such as a stronger representation of older people being needed in research in order to shape research and its impact. When we published the work in 2023, the Chief Medical Officer for England, Professor Chris Whitty, noted its importance. And as a direct result, earlier this year, the NIHR signed a joint statement with other major UK research funders, committing them all to greater inclusion of older adults in health and care research. Specifically, the statement commits funders to actively support the inclusion of older adults, challenge unjustified exclusion, especially where complex health conditions are involved, and ensure research is designed with equity in mind. We'll see how that plays out in the funding landscape going forward, but it serves as another example whereby bringing ethical exploration and public participation in early, we can align our research ecosystem with those who stand to benefit from it. But could we bring publics in even sooner than this, even before we have a project question in mind? Research, as we all know, doesn't operate in a social and ethical vacuum, and it is the relationship between science and society that shapes our whole innovation ecosystem. We regularly look to how advancing science capabilities could be used to drive innovative solutions or transform our health and how we deliver care. We've also heard about all the challenges in doing that. And as I've said, publics can participate directly in research and innovation. They may be doing that as an experimental candidate, a voice within a focus group or survey, as we've heard about, or a member of a deliberative effort such as a citizens' jury or assembly. But despite these efforts, we are still finding science and innovation can misalign with what the public want, their values, and what society most needs. For example, many have hailed AI chatbots to be a way to cure loneliness for older people, but a 2023 poll of 1,000 people aged 65 and over found that while the older generation is comfortable, I'm one of them, using Google Maps and WhatsApp, they do not wish to talk to an AI. So how have we allowed a tech possibility to push us towards a solution the public is telling us they do not want? Something isn't working, and this is what we're pondering at NCOB. How can we capture the public want, values and needs in all its diversity, and then use it to meaningfully direct early innovation? This will help it align with societal values from the start and identify common ground across diverse perspectives and how public consideration of the trade-offs might be required. It will also ensure its efforts is something people can support because they have been able to influence innovation development as well as its implementation. This will hopefully make research and innovation something the public are able to trust because they have had a say in the future that we are all trying to achieve, whether as inventors, scientists, practitioners, researchers, or publics. So could bringing public voices into our anticipation work be a way to do this? We are 2 years into our new ways of working and our anticipatory evolution, and we're making some progress and seeing some benefits. But in some ways, we have barely scratched the surface in where we could go with it and what we could do differently. And we'll learn so much from this conference in supporting us in this. And this question on when and how we involve the public is something we're keen to explore in our own work and in collaboration with others. Next year, our 14-day human embryo rule project I mentioned earlier will offer us some insight into how publics can engage with future scenarios and use them to inform their views, which will in turn inform policy as well as methodological developments in future's work. We are scoping whether we can use the gathered public perspectives to further shape and refine our scenarios. This would allow us to demonstrate how a future innovation scenario could be reimagined if social wants, concerns and conditions of acceptance are meaningfully factored in. We will also be seeking to bring the public voice into our 2027 time-framed horizon scan. That's when we'll do the next one. Currently, public views are factored into our scans through an assessment of news and social sentiment, but we are keen to take a step beyond this and, where possible, speak to people directly. Resource-intensive as this is, it is the only way to create a truly inclusive and participatory approach to innovation and futures work. And finally, we want to offer a richer analysis of our horizon scan, embedding an ethical assessment into some of the topics we have identified, signalling what some of the likely implications could be, the questions that need to be asked before the research or tech development continues. At NCOB, we hope that through ethical foresight, we can help provide our audiences and communities with useful insights that they could be better placed to act upon. So, to summarise, while it is clear that effective horizon scanning can help us anticipate future scientific developments and the opportunities and risks that these may bring, we believe it can also be used to alert us to a range of ethical concerns, and that this should be embedded into the horizon scanning alongside public participation and involvement. It can also alert us to how ethical issues, social values and public concerns are being taken into account at all stages of the innovation trajectory or not. When used in this way, ethical horizon scanning that is sensitive to technological and ethical trade-offs and informed by public values can support the navigation towards equitable and inclusive health futures. So we're committed to enhancing our ability to do this, and we're on a journey to get there. Coming to conferences like this, to be here with experts like all of you, is a great opportunity, not only for us to share ideas, but to form partnerships, as Dawn said right at the very beginning, and to learn from each other. So thank you very much for inviting me and for listening. I look forward to your questions. If they're too technological, luckily our Assistant Director for Horizon Scanning is in the audience and can answer them. Thank you.
So I would like to thank you for your very inspiring presentation. I am Foresight researcher, and I would like to ask you about scenario methods that you have used for your research. Was it like intuitive logic school of scenario construction, or maybe something else?
So where's Jay? Okay, I'll start with what I know, but Jay was very involved in this. We were using an approach where you are kind of break down the issue into sort of specific factors and conditions, then map that against other factors. So you can then create a matrix of scenarios, and then you can use those to develop, across those 4x4 dimensions, 2x2 sort of thing, to create those scenarios, then use those for discussion. And I think that's worked really well, and we've taken it out to different workshops, as I understand it, Jay, but you might have a better answer. And then what we're going to do is then use our public engagement to kind of refine those as well, so we can kind of input other things into the matrix. Jay can add more.
I'm happy to have a chat about it outside because it's quite nerdy and I love to get into it. But at the root of it, it's a morphological scenario building method that we've used, but we've injected the steeple framework on top of it to identify the social drivers and added a kind of an ethical framework to really pull those forward. So the team that aren't here, so I can't speak for the work that they've done, but we ran a very in-depth workshop with scientific leaders to try and pull out where the embryo research culture sort of trade-offs could be and where the science could get us to. And then we did 2 online workshops with international components to it, with regulators and patient groups as well, to bring those perspectives in. And then the team identified, as Sarah said, a series of kind of enablers and drivers, and then they identified the themes and then used them to build up 5 futures that were kind of coming through quite strongly based on what was possible or what people wanted to see. And then elements of those have been pulled through into our public dialogue work. So they've been used for personas and kind of stimulus materials. And we're hoping that we can capture how the public have responded to those and feel about them. So then we can essentially tweak the scenarios to then publish them later next year to show how public wants and values have shaped what the scenarios look like based on expert feed-in and then expert plus public. So it's a bit of a journey that we're going on, but it's been interesting. Very long, very long.
Yeah, long process, but we will publish not both process and outcome.
Yes, yeah, we publish everything.
As we get further, so we can share where we've got to.
Hi, again. Really great session, thank you. I'm Russell from the National Audit Office. Just picking up on your point about, through the public engagement, what people want, I'm just wondering, when it comes down to actually the understanding, where does that fit in? Because some people or the public may not understand the solutions out there or the innovations out there to really grasp if it is something that will make a positive difference. So if you see a lack of understanding or an opportunity to increase understanding or education awareness, is that something that comes through here or something that you kind of work on?
Yeah, no, good question, and that's generally part and parcel of what an engagement process would involve. So it's kind of not like a sort of raw dialogue, but involves sharing of information, not least so that it's an informed dialogue, while also allowing participants obviously to draw on their experience and their own knowledge. But it is a kind of mutual learning process, so that and so it's kind of crafting in a sense what. It's not like, sorry, I'm not explaining myself very well, because it's late in the afternoon now, but it's a way of understanding views and opinions, but also what drives them and what leads to them and what underlying values might be. But these are very often not static. And so it's actually the process of dialogue and the interactions between whoever is engaged in that dialogue. So it's not a collection of individual people or individual phenomena, but actually the interaction, and it always involves that sharing of information. So we've been involved in a citizens' jury, for example. Experts come in to talk about different points of view. The jury are coached a little bit in being able to assess different points of view and whether someone is advocating strongly, that you need to bring a critical lens to that. It's not stopping the person advocating, but you can kind of learn to understand these different perspectives. Does that answer your question? A little bit long-windedly, apologies.
A bit of a high-level question, but I would be very interested in hearing your views about trust and looking at the kind of societal and global trends that we have around, the downward kind of spiral that we have with trust at the moment, and the atomization of society and how people tend to, show trust or its lack in different smaller kind of units, whether it actually relates to the work that you're doing around kind of bioethics, especially in terms of public's trust in research, in science, and what would be the intersection of trust and bioethics. Just very interested to hear your kind of like views and insights in terms of where we might be going, and in terms of foresight, would it have any implications for your council?
Yes, it would have implications for the council. It's a good question. So I think the evidence for a real diminution in trust is not as strong as the wider sort of media ecosystem would lead us to believe. So I think, so we've had a discussion already today about the kind of diversity of evidence that we're required. And I think if you're looking at trust, it's very easy to take a kind of deficit model of trust with the public, like we used to take a deficit model around public understanding. But actually, when you drill down, that's not necessarily the case. It may be trust in particular contexts and trust from some particular groups as well. I don't think the motivation for engaging with publics should be to overcome a not necessarily real deficit model of trust, but to help to build trustworthy systems. So almost to flip it towards the system, which is what we do in research governance and in governance of everything. And one way to do that is to involve the publics in generating appropriate governance frameworks, and then they will be more trustworthy. So I think that's how I would see the kind of the relationship between the two. I mean, bioethics, well, trust is a key component, but I think we have to really think about how we understand that, we shouldn't use any concept lightly, and there's always a danger of doing that, and then they serve a rhetorical purpose. Okay, time to stop.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And before I pass on to Pauline, who'll go through the poster walk and drinks, just like to say a massive thank you to everyone who's contributed to a great first day of the conference. All the speakers, panellists, everyone getting stuck in with some great conversations, that enthusiasm. Really looking forward to tomorrow, and hopefully no one will have to brave a blizzard to get here. So.
Super. Yeah, it's been a really good day, and it hasn't finished yet, which is very exciting. So now we've got the drinks reception and networking and the poster walk. So basically, if you just head out here and to the poster area, which is behind the registration desk where we first met you, grab a drink. We're not going to do it in a particularly formal way, but if you do have a poster, please head over there so you can answer any questions. But again, thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.